great. But walking through the overview here, today we'll hear from, remember we contracted with the Berkeley Group who are here with us. Kent and Rachel will kind of introduce them, who they are and what they've been doing. They've been in our community, have held at least 2 public engagements. There's one tomorrow at RS Payne, as I understand it, and at least one other, so 4 total. And I know that they're setting up interviews with each one of you to engage you about the comprehensive plan. We've built in some breaks to make sure that you guys can check your cell phones, refresh your coffees, get a little snack, and if I haven't pointed it out, at the end of the hallway here are fruit and vegetables and yogurt and other things, and there's waters and there's other kind of mixed nuts and what do you call it? Lifesavers and things like that. They're over there. Budget and public engagement with Donna and Greg. What that's going to be, we've created, and I want to give kudos again to the information technology. We've created a resource that's not unlike, and forgive me for the sports analogy, but you have bracketology. Each March, you have March Madness that you go from now, I think it's 84 teams down to 4 teams to 2 teams. We have an interactive thing. You have these QR codes. At some point, we're going to ask you to zap it. And for those that are tuning in from home, and thanks to Phil and Shaq and our intern that are kind of streaming this, if you're at home, you can engage too and kind of play along in the game. And the premise there is that if we had more resources than ever, what are the other things that we would want to invest in? And it's interesting how it kind of comes down. So that's going to be part of the budget process this coming fiscal year, is just how do we engage the community? What are the things that we're talking about? How does a budget work? Those are some of the things in the 2.5 years that I've been here that I've heard from the community, that they want some more information about how the budget works. Then we have lunch, which is provided, which is great. And then after lunch, we're going to talk to you about our capital improvement plan and kind of what fiscal 25 looks like. And there's this opportunity investment. This past Tuesday, I talked to you about an amphitheater and resources we have. Donna walked you through it. Finance, we've talked a little about the city's fiscal year-end 24 surplus, about $15 million. I engaged each one of you about the project. What I heard in those one-on-ones, and since then, is, all right, Winter, if we were to propose other ways in which to maybe expend some of those resources to do certain things, whether or not to kind of shore up a project underway that needs a little bit more money or something else, I'm going to have these behind you. There are these easels, and they're going to list out some potential projects and or investments. I'm going to get you up out of your seats and looking at those and maybe taking stickers and saying, hey, this is of interest to me, and we'll kind of talk through those opportunities. And then in the 2.5 years that I've been here, when I first arrived, I said how important communication is. And some of that is not just simply the way in which we communicate with one another verbally, but it's also the way that we look. Anna and Kyle, who are here from our communications department, we've gone through a process with our workforce and actually our stakeholders to talk about our brand. Because when I first arrived, this isn't dissimilar from other cities that I've been a part of. Everyone has their own signature line, their own kind of business card, their own signature line that's in their department, and I'm going to show you some of that. And so the opportunity we have between resources to redo the city website, to redo council chambers, and some other things is I'm going to show you kind of a new way in which we're going to refresh ourselves and get on message with one another. And spoiler alert, there might be something that's on my lapel right here that might show you where we're headed, what the things are. And then separate from that, I want the city council to understand you have your own brand. Each Tuesday when you sit up on that dais, above you is that seal that's there. And so some opportunity there for you and your mayor, vice mayor, and your peers about ways in which that you too show your brand for the city. So a big impactful day. I hope it's one that you, Mayor, we're talking about relaxing and fun. I hope that we can meet those together. It's meant to be interactive with some of the things that we're going to do. But with that, if it's okay, Mayor, I was going to call Tom up to introduce and welcome us here to this lovely building, tell you a little bit about IT. So if that's okay with you, Mayor?
Go ahead, absolutely.
All right, Ms. Williams, come on up.
See if we've got some volume here, or do you want me to just talk loud? Keep going. All right. Well, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, colleagues, and guests, I would like to welcome you to the City of Lynchburg's Information Technology Center. We are glad to have you all here today. My name is Tom Williamson. I'm the City of Lynchburg's Chief Information Officer. This is home base for our IT professionals that are engaged in the support of the systems that drive the business processes relied on by all city departments. Our central IT technology staff provides enterprise administration and management for over 1,300 laptop and desktop computers, 1,500 email accounts, 1,400 desk phones, 875 cellular devices, and more than 20 enterprise application systems that power those critical city business processes. To ensure these services remain operational, we monitor and maintain 170 core networking components, systems, and services. These systems provide the interconnectivity that is required to support municipal operations and services. In today's interconnected world, all city departments rely on this technology to fulfill those essential services to our citizens, and it is our job in IT to ensure that they are available and on the ready to support our colleagues that are directly involved in service delivery operations. The increased reliance on technology to effectively operate city systems brings with it an increase in the need for vigilance in the realm of information security. You don't have to look far to read the latest news regarding ransomware and data breaches. This isn't just happening to private corporations, but it's happening to municipalities just like ours. These attacks, when successful, can bring about costly recovery operations as well as reputational damage to a municipality. As a response to the ever-increasing cybersecurity threat landscape, last year, we defined the need for 2 new cybersecurity positions for our central IT department. These positions were included in the FY24 budget with council's support. I am pleased to tell you that today these positions have been filled, and I would like to take a moment to thank you for your support for our information security program. These new security positions are providing our technology department with the necessary human resources to further enhance and refine our cybersecurity defenses. This is found in the form of deeper collaboration between all city departments, other technical staff, ensuring security best practices are being followed in all areas, and that existing technologies are configured in the most secure manner possible to best protect and defend the city's information assets. As an example of the types of threats this team responds to, just last month, over 230 suspicious email messages were reported to IT city staff. These messages were investigated, and our security team found that 126 were true cyber threats and took appropriate action to mitigate and extract them from city systems. And these are the messages that get through the already layered defense structure that we have. They're the ones that are harder to detect, that automated processes can't always catch. So you need that human eye as a final review. These are commonly known as phishing messages and considered to be one of the prominent ways attackers seek to gain footholds onto systems and networks. Our cyber defenders are key to ensuring these messages are promptly removed and then ensuring further messages no longer can be received from those bad actors. Additionally, our new security team monitors for situations where real accounts become compromised, follow up accordingly, and they ensure only authorized city staff have access to city systems. They also partner with the Department of Homeland Security for service offerings that are used to review our outside defenses and then work with city staff to address any discovered vulnerabilities. They also provide internal scanning to help monitor for threats inside our network, and they professionally manage our next-generation antivirus technologies. They are a busy bunch indeed. And finally, I'd like to add that the city's forward-thinking approach to cybersecurity was recently recognized by the Center for Digital Government, where the City of Lynchburg placed 6th for cities our size across the country in the most recent Digital City Survey. The Center for Digital Government's Digital City Survey recognizes cities for their strategic and effective use of information technologies to serve their citizens and perform local government operations. Since 2004, the City of Lynchburg has ranked in the top 6 nationally for cities in our population category. How cool is that? I am proud of our IT professionals and thankful for the amazing work they do in support of the City of Lynchburg. I am privileged to work among them, and I believe they are the best IT team around. So all that being said, we are happy to welcome you to the city's IT conference facility today. We wish you guys a wonderful retreat, and we're glad you're here. Thank you.
much. We will now move on to our comprehensive plan. Kent White, our Assistant City Manager.
Good morning, Madam Mayor.
Good morning.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of City Council. We're really excited to be able to kick off your retreat with this discussion of the comprehensive plan. And we have with us Catherine Redfern and Darren Coffey with the Berkeley Group to help talk to us about the process, what we've done, where we are right now, and where we're going. And the Berkeley Group is really accomplished at helping communities like ours kind of figure out the vision for land use in their community and give you, most importantly, capture the information from your residents, from your businesses, so that you can make the best decisions to guide the growth and development of our community. They do this in communities throughout Virginia and have done some locally in our area. And with that, I'm going to welcome Catherine to the podium to talk to you a little bit about the process. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you all for having us at your retreat this morning. The Berkeley Group is truly honored to have partnered with the city to help you all update your comprehensive plan. It is one of the most important planning tools that the community and U.S. City Council have at your disposal to help guide the growth and direction of the city. The agenda for this morning for our portion of the presentation is, as Kent said, a brief review of what a comprehensive plan is, what progress has been made to date, and where we're headed from here. We'll present some of the very preliminary data, themes, and ideas that we've heard through community engagement up to this point, but most importantly, we want to hear from you all. Today's presentation is actually part one of a two-part conversation we will be having with you all with City Council. We'll be following up this morning's activities where we're talking about some high-level themes and goals with some interviews next week where we really get to delve into more detail into some of these specific topics and ideas. All right. So let's jump into it. What is a comprehensive plan and what does it do? I like to think of a comprehensive plan as a community's roadmap for the future. It is an official adopted public policy document that provides long-range policy direction for a variety of topics, such as land use, transportation, housing, economic development, among others. The planning horizon for a comprehensive plan is about 15 to 20 years, so it's a long-range document, and it should provide specific direction for city officials and staff to help guide the decisions that they're going to make over that long time frame. That said, the document itself is not regulation, at least not the way your zoning ordinances or subdivision ordinances are, but they should provide the foundation for the update of those regulatory tools. They should also be closely coordinated with your other plans and studies, capital improvement plan, your annual budget cycle, to make sure that all those documents are talking together. The city's authority and responsibility for updating a comprehensive plan comes directly from state law. The Code of Virginia mandates much of what goes into comprehensive planning in the state of Virginia, as well as the process for community engagement, as well as adoption, and then when the plan must be reviewed and updated. That said, these are not one-size-fits-all plans, nor are they pie-in-the-sky, hard-to-achieve plans. They should be very specific, actionable plans based directly on community input, community needs, as well as based on fiscal and physical reality. So one of the most important components of developing a comprehensive plan is the outreach process. Hearing from the community at large, hearing from city staff, hearing from you all as City Council, as the governing body and stewards of this plan. This will be your plan to adopt, so it's imperative that it be realistic and reflect community needs so that you can implement it accordingly. So what has been the process to date? Updating the comprehensive plan breaks down into 3 phases, and we are in the first phase of the process, which is the assessment and engagement phase. We're assessing current conditions and engaging the community. Phase 2 will be the drafting phase, where we're really rolling up our sleeves, drafting the document, and then phase 3 is review, where we bring the drafted document back to the public, back to you all for review, and then usher it through the adoption process. We're really just at the beginning of this first engagement phase. Though the planning process did begin with staff-led residential developer meetings back in January of this year to discuss trends and dynamics related to single-family and multifamily development within the city. This was a proactive step that staff took to really seed the plan with information regarding housing and the housing market in the city. This is a big issue for communities across Virginia, so being proactive and getting out ahead of it, making sure that we have the information we needed as we started the process was vitally important. In the spring of this year, Berkeley Group came on board and we conducted a diagnostic of the city's current comprehensive plan. The diagnostic assesses the current plan for compliance with state code as well as planning best practices. The aim of the diagnostic is to provide a baseline for updating the current document, identifying areas of focus and needs so that the update process can be as efficient and streamlined as possible. The diagnostic assessment as well as the written report are both available on the lynchburgtogether.com website, which is the project website for the comprehensive plan update, so you can read the full report there. During the same time frame that we were conducting the diagnostic, we were also conducting interviews with city staff and the departments within the city. We were gathering data both on planning needs, existing planning documents, as well as identifying issues from their perspective. In August, we kicked off the public engagement portion of the plan with a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and Economic Development Authority. And this meeting brought those two groups together to review data collected to date, as well as to refine the public engagement approach and the questions we are asking of the public as we're going into these public workshops and other engagement efforts. We also discussed with them strengths, weaknesses, goals, and opportunities from their perspective to help guide plan development. Since then, we've begun baseline conditions analysis, so demographic data analysis, population projections. We've also launched the project website, lynchburgtogether.com, which includes a public input survey, an interactive map, and other interactive engagement activities. We've also been conducting community workshops, both to help inform and educate the public about what the comprehensive plan is and what the process is, but more importantly, to gather input from their perspective on planning goals and needs for the city of Lynchburg. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the survey and the public workshops, as these are our two primary public engagement platforms during this first phase of the comprehensive plan update. The survey is a 17-question survey that addresses both high-level as well as targeted planning issues. It is available both online and in print, and the survey can be taken anonymously. The survey is currently set to close at the end of the year, on December 31st, but after our final workshop on December 14th, we'll reassess if we want to extend that deadline to get more responses. We're also conducting 4 public workshops. The first 2 were held on November 15th and 16th, and the second 2 will be November 2nd, tomorrow, and as well as December 14th. And these workshops are held at different times and locations throughout the city, but the format of each of them is the same, with the same questions and exercises conducted at each. The idea being that people have busy schedules, so they can pick the one workshop that works best for their schedule and attend that one. But that said, people are also welcome to attend more than one workshop. We're addressing different topics at each of those, so they could come participate in one topic at one workshop, come to another and participate in that topic. The workshops themselves are broken into 2 parts. The first part is a large group discussion of strengths, weaknesses, and goals, and we do that using a virtual polling platform, which we're going to use with you all in just a minute. And then the second part is small group exercises, where we break the groups up into smaller groups. We have them answering a set of questions, drawing on maps, and brainstorming ideas. And each of those small groups has a specific theme. And there are 5 themes or 5 topic groups that we've been addressing at these workshops. And they are housing and neighborhoods, city character and development, natural resources and the environment, transportation and connectivity, and economic growth and investment. And these exercises and the questions we're asking in these exercises in the workshops are really meant to complement and build on the survey questions so that the survey and the public workshops are working together. A link to the survey and information about the upcoming 2 workshops and their times will be available on the final slide of this presentation, or you can also go to lynchburgtogether.com. There's some postcards floating around, I think, where you can access the survey and get more information about those workshops. I will just add here that one of your key roles as city council, in addition to providing input into the planning process, to adopting the plan and ultimately implementing the plan, is also acting as ambassadors for this plan. So please spread the word about these upcoming public engagement opportunities and make sure people are participating. Okay. So we are going to present some of the very preliminary results and themes that we have heard from through engagement thus far. But first, we want to hear from you all. And everyone obviously already knows what to do with these QR codes. But you can scan this QR code. You can use any smart device. It'll work on a computer. You can use the URL, or if your camera's not working, you can enter the text code here. But what this should do is it should pull up a Poll Everywhere site, and it might give you the option to enter your name. You can enter your name if you want, or you can skip it. All of the responses to these questions will be anonymous. So whether you answer your name or not, all of this is anonymous. However, your responses are going to appear here on the screen. So anything you type will be up here for folks to read, but no one will know who's typing what. So again, anonymous. All right, does everyone have the Poll Everywhere platform pulled up? Seems to be working. Okay. All right, so we'll complete these exercises. There are going to be 3 questions. And these are the same questions we asked at the workshops. And after you answer each of those questions, we'll then share some of the results that we've seen from workshops and the kickoff meeting. Oh, you guys are on it. All right, this is a word cloud exercise, and keep in mind it's best to use 1 or 2 word responses. You can enter as many responses as you want, but as you'll see, this screen will start to populate with words, and the more frequently a word is used, the larger that word will become. So what we'll start to see is kind of a hierarchy of ideas, hierarchy of strengths. Give you all a few more minutes to enter everything. Yeah, and you can see some things are already floating to the top. Citizens and services. Trails. Community. Vacuuming leaves. It is very important this time of year. It is not to be underrated, yeah. Accepting, natural, these are all great words. All right, things are still bouncing around. We'll give it a little bit longer. But services and citizens seem to be maintaining kind of their top spot here.
People that are tuning in, they could.
Correct. Correct, yep.
Just make sure that those that are tuning in or watching, please do it too. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone who has a QR code accessible to them. So services, does anyone want to elaborate on specifically what services are our strength, or is this services in general? Anyone who entered that have a thought? Okay.
I'll offer, I talk about each day when I greet new people to the organization, employees. I talk about my municipal report card that I need a B+ or better in services, to include, when we get up and do our business, being able to flush the toilet at work, and when we brush our teeth, that the water that we use is good, that if we're not feeling well, we can pick up the phone, someone will answer it, and someone will respond. Whether it's police, fire, and or human services or mental health services, and then you really figure out just how important you are as a city manager when someone's trash is not picked up, and so you need to timely pick up that trash and our bulk. So I think we can always be better, but I think Lynchburg and the way in which that we deploy municipal services, the ones that I just listed, are top notch, and that really takes the better part of 1,200 employees that do it every day and do it well. So that's, in my putting that was my thought as far as services.
That's wonderful. Anything else stick out to anyone here? Community and services are kind of maintaining that top spot, as well as citizens, trails, cost. We'll see a few slides that relative low cost of living is a strength that people recognize of the city, natural beauty. Anything else stick out to anyone before we move on to the summary responses? All right, I'm going to move ahead to the next slide. This is the word cloud that represents the summary of responses from public workshops and the kickoff. And there are some overlaps here, outdoors, trails, beautiful, cost, but recreation in downtown, at least so far, and we've only had 2 of the 4 public workshops, are taking the number one spot here. And we've heard a lot, and I think this goes to the point of services. They're your everyday services, but they're also these quality of life services, and recreation and the trails that the city provides is clearly a service that people really value about the city. College, I think that could probably be pluralized, colleges, and I think Liberty appears on this list. Anyone see anything here that they have questions about or a thought about? Parks, James, kind of all variations on a theme. All right, let's move on to the next question. This is also a word cloud question, but it's the reverse of the first one. What are Lynchburg's weaknesses? What can the city improve on? And again, as many responses as you would like. I think you guys got the hang of it. You know how to do this. Things are still kind of trickling in, bouncing around. But housing. Affordable, which I'm assuming goes with housing. Workforce. Crime. Housing's really holding on to that number 1 spot. Waiting for it to shift around, but it's not. Things slowing down here. Entertainment. Entertainment is something that is, I haven't heard a lot about. Oh, but now it just disappeared. Anyone who entered entertainment or have a thought about what that might refer to?
I put that in because as the mother of 3 college age, 18 to 24-year-olds that leave Lynchburg to go to other cities with, between an hour and 3 hours from here to do things. It's all entertainment based. So we see them taking dollars that could be spent here for the same types of activities and going to other cities to spend it. So the idea of having those same types of businesses here, because my 3 sons that do that are a sampling of thousands of the same kids that live here, amongst the 5 universities that do the same thing. So if you take an average of those kids that are all going to Roanoke, Charlottesville, and Richmond because of the lack of opportunity here, and you took that revenue that's now being spent in those other cities, and we replicated it here because of what they're doing in the other cities, it would be make a huge difference to what we are bringing in Lynchburg. So.
Can you elaborate a little bit on types of entertainment activities that they're finding elsewhere? What isn't here?
Well, Topgolf is a huge one, and I've already looked at the. That's been for 4 years now. It's not something that we can probably model successfully in our with our demographic here or the size of our market, but something to that capacity. concerts, types of kind of like unique types of venues that the other cities are able to offer. Shopping is a huge one. Again, just kind of like, just really kind of like quaint, unique types of opportunities that we just don't have here yet. So we're getting there slowly. Our downtown is less developed than those cities that I just mentioned, and so they go there for those types of things.
Just out of curiosity, is this pulling like, when I say like, I mean similar, like words and combining them on its own, or is it actually taking what we're submitting and?
Taking your words for verbatim. So if you entered a 2 or 3 word phrase, it's going to break those 3 words apart and then put them into this word cloud.
There would likely compile it.
Yes, and then from there. So it's great for this kind of visual snapshot of things that start to float to the top, but you do lose some of that nuance. So housing and actually, I think I'll move on, unless anyone has anything burning they want to say about this, I'll move on to the summary slide. And you can see some similarities here. Housing is the big one that takes the top spot. And what I was saying about these word clouds being, kind of great visual snapshots, you do lose some nuance because there are a lot of factors that go into housing. Housing is a pretty general term. But when you start to drill down into some of these other words, so I see blight, I see affordable, zoning, there are all these factors that go into housing. And I think the 3 key things that we've heard are quality housing, upkeep of existing housing stock, affordable housing, but more housing choice, providing a variety of housing choice. And then this idea of how zoning, the current zoning ordinance is limiting the ability to provide different types of housing and housing choice. So that you can start to parse that out a little bit. Crime in schools, pretty tied for the number 2 spot here. Traffic, I think it's this, again, this is a nuanced thing. It's less about volume of traffic, at least what we've heard thus far is less about volume of traffic and more about specific safety and vehicular issues within the road network. So yeah, so some clear overlap here. Yeah, the land, this is one of those issues where it's probably taken a 2-word phrase and broken it apart, but what's probably happened here is folks have said land use. Land use is an issue. Maybe the types of land uses, and in this case they might be referring to housing types, or maybe it's land that's available for development. So it's kind of a more general term to represent kind of a multifaceted issue. And again, these are very preliminary responses. We've had two workshops, so these will change. And the next phase, after we've completed all the public engagement, is to really dive into this data with a fine-tooth comb and produce a public engagement summary that more accurately summarizes what we've heard throughout all this public engagement. This is just the fun first snapshot of what we've been hearing. Other questions about this? What type of housing? Yeah,
So, and when I ask that, I'm saying, are those folks asking for, when affordable housing is said, is it for us to facilitate affordable housing, build affordable housing? Because I'm of the persuasion that we should facilitate economic growth. I can't say the president built 500,000 jobs, facilitated, if you will. That's kind of my logic. So like when affordable housing is said, what does that mean?
Yeah, and affordable housing, particularly when we're in these public workshops, becomes a catch-all phrase for housing choice and diversity of housing types. And we actually
You have your definition and
Yeah.
others, so that's why I'm trying to get more of a holistic understanding.
That's why you have to take these word clouds with a bit of a grain of salt. There is a lot of nuance behind them. And we have a couple slides in, we will dive into the housing issue. We've got some more specific responses. But essentially what we're hearing is that there's general support for single-family housing, but not your traditional large lot single-family house. That's just no longer affordable for many groups that need housing. It's also not particularly affordable for developers to be investing in that kind of development. So we've got a slide that shows some of the things that people are interested in. Townhouses, row houses, which are all single-family homes, but it's just a different type of single-family home. All right, other questions here before we move on to the last question? All right, this is, you can probably pull it up on your phone, it's not coming up on the screen, is a question about goals or what we should be trying to accomplish as a community. And this question functions a little bit differently. It's not a word cloud. It will appear as a list, and hopefully it'll appear on the screen. I'm not sure what's happening with the display here. But you'll definitely be able to see them on your phone. There we go. And so this question, again, is a list. You're not limited to 1 or 2 word phrases. It also has the added component of you're able to upvote or downvote everyone's responses. And again, this is completely anonymous. No one's going to know if you upvoted or downvoted their response. But what will start happening is things that are said more frequently or have more thumbs up will start to float to the top. Economic development with 3 upvotes. Education. Yeah, I'm sorry that's not displaying perfectly. Hopefully you all can see all the upvotes on your phone. Economic development coming up at 4. Affordable housing, access to housing, public spaces. That's an interesting one. Anyone want to talk about public spaces, what that means? What it meant to them when they upvoted it? Is it creating more public spaces, improving existing public spaces, access to public spaces, all of the above? All right, it looks like things have slowed down a little bit. So the 3 that I saw at the top were education, economic development, and this public spaces and housing. Academic success and graduation, that's great nuance to the education piece. Got a lot of votes for that. Okay. I think we're seeing a lot of overlap. I'm going to move on to the summary slide. There we are. So these are the top 4 goals that we saw throughout engagement, and these were chosen based on the number of times they were mentioned, as well as the number of upvotes that they received. And in the number 1 spot is increased quantity, affordability, and types of housing. And I think that goes without saying. You all had that response, and we've seen it pretty consistently. Number 2 is improved schools, and in this case, I believe that's specifically referring to the public schools, the K through 12 system. And I like some of the nuance of the goals that you all provided about graduation rates and school attainment. Number 3 is pretty broad. It says grow and develop the economy. But as we'll see in a few slides, there is a strong sense from the community that Lynchburg has done a lot of good work towards economic development, but of course there's always opportunity to leverage more assets and opportunities for additional growth. And then in the number 4 spot is increased options for recreation and alternative transportation. As reflected in the community's strength slide, we've heard a lot about how valuable recreation is to the community, and the city currently provides great recreational assets and amenities that they value. But again, the question coming from the public is, okay, how can we better leverage what we have? How can we increase connectivity and access to those spaces and those amenities? All right, final thoughts about this before we move on to some of the more specific themes and ideas that we've heard. All right. Seeing none, I will move on. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Again, and if we'll get to this part of the conversation, maybe I'll yield it to that point, but increased quantity, affordability, and types of housing, again, is that the city's responsibility to take that on directly or facilitate, like incentivize in some capacity? I feel that, like, we're all going to support economic development, but even of the 6 of us here right now, there's a stark difference of economic development means we're going to do, a sewer project into Richland Hills or even downtown, or we're going to make a pad-ready site and the city will front $1.7 million to accommodate that. There'll be a difference of opinion on whether that's the city's responsibility or not. And
Absolutely.
so while we support, sure, increase affordable housing. You understand what I'm saying?
Exactly. I get exactly what you're saying. And part of this first phase of engagement and what we're hearing, these are very high-level ideas. This is generally what the community would like to see. And part of the planning process is saying, okay, we heard a lot about increasing quantity, affordability, and types of housing. So what can the city do about that? What are the specific strategies that the city can take on that they can agree that will help meet this overarching goal? And so that's part of the planning process is figuring out, okay, to what degree do we facilitate, to what degree do we incentivize, what are the specific ways that we can increase quantity, affordability, and types of housing within the city. Other questions or thoughts? Absolutely.
Found single-family housing development spur local economy more than, or in some notable fashion, rather than expanding a business by 25 jobs and taking $5-6 million of state local grant fund? I mean, are you seeing that in other areas?
So is the question, does the development of single-family housing spur economic growth more than?
I guess I'm merging two together. So economic development was a major priority, and affordable housing is one. So how do you marry the two? Obviously, we have a workforce need, so I'm trying to bring all these together and say, okay, we don't do workshop anymore. Get a junior in high school to come out on an apprenticeship to build single-family housing development in the city that needs single-family housing.
Yeah, these are all chicken and egg issues, right? And there is no single silver bullet. And we know that single-family housing is more expensive to develop, and it puts greater strains on city services and on the school system. But at the same time, we need that kind of development to bring workforce here, housing for young families who are just starting out, housing for workforce. So yes, it's a chicken and egg, and all of those issues will be thought about together as we're developing strategies.
I'm always interested to see what other cities are doing when it comes to affordable housing. What are the projects that may be engaged with your city resources? How are they used in other communities? Like Danville was doing something, or Rich was doing something, just to see what the resources they have, how they're using those resources, and what they are doing to address some of the issue. Even also with homelessness, some whether it's our responsibility or not, but some cities are doing certain things, and how are they using certain city resources for that? And what is our role as city leaders or city council members to address like homelessness in our community?
Yeah, case studies of other communities is always valuable in these planning processes, and homelessness is an issue that we have addressed in other communities, and it isn't something that's come up thus far in community engagement, but like I said, we are very, very early in this process. So as issues come up, we will certainly be researching and working with you all to figure out the best way to approach that for the city. Darren?
I would just add, we're early in this process, so we don't like to fashion recommended strategies until we have a better understanding of what it is the community wants, is willing to tolerate, pay for, et cetera. But to specifically answer your question about other communities and what do they do about affordable housing, the most serious ones develop housing authorities. They use their entitlement funds that come either directly through the federal government or through the Department of Housing and Community Development in the state to identify their top priorities and use the money toward those things, whether that be a homeless shelter or whether it be vouchers that can be distributed more geographically. What it is less and less about these days is, Section 8 housing, which is what everybody, is afraid of and fears. You don't put up a complex that's 100% affordable housing anymore. It's just not recommended. It's a mixture of incomes and uses. Land banks are increasingly being considered in Virginia. Other states use them much more aggressively. So there are lots of tools out there.
Your answer, when you say land banks, so we're all on the same page, what do you mean?
Land bank is, it's kind of like an authority that is where the city, for example, could transfer vacant land or derelict land. It could be foreclosed on by the city and transferred to a land bank, and then the land bank's mission is to use that for affordability goals. So I think there are 3 localities so far in Virginia that are looking at that. So it's not a widely used tool, but it's a tool. I think Roanoke, I just saw this in the Housing Forward thing the other day. Somewhere in Hampton Roads, and then there was one county, I believe, but it was a more urbanized county, and I think that was in Northern Virginia. So, like I said, it's one of the challenges Lynchburg has is the availability of land. Like your issues are going to be more, redevelopment of land rather than what do we do with all this excess green space that we have. You don't have that much. So, yeah.
Just that, since I've been on council, I don't know if we've ever had a joint meeting with the Housing Authority, and maybe that might be a place that we could talk with just to kind of share ideas and thoughts. Maybe in a community roundtable type thing where we could bring in the community as well and just hear what they have to say in their board and what are some of the thoughts and what other localities are doing as well. Thank you.
We've kind of gone there already, but we're going to move on to some. Wait, 1 second. Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm wondering why no one mentioned tackling poverty as a city, because it's a big issue in our community.
Poverty was an issue that came up. In these summary slides, it was not one of the top, at least not yet. And again, only 2 workshops in, these results are very, very preliminary, so that is subject to change. Yeah.
I didn't notice mental health issues up there either. We have a lot of people walking the streets of Lynchburg that
Might be tied into some of the word cloud where crime makes it to the top of the list. Again, there are nuance behind these words, and this is just a very quick, dirty, visual snapshot of what people are saying. So I think those issues are there. They just haven't perhaps floated to the top in that particular graphic. Other thoughts or questions? We're going to talk about all these in a little bit more detail, and of course we'll have time next week when we're sitting down with you all to discuss these in far greater detail as well. All right, so I'm going to present again some of the key themes that we've heard, some of the more nuance and details that we've heard through the workshops and the survey. Here we go. And the first theme is housing and neighborhoods. And the key theme or takeaway we've heard so far, again, we've said this multiple times, is that there is a desire for more housing of all types. We've heard clearly that folks would like to see housing for seniors, for young families, those folks just starting out, as well as the workforce, and that traditional large lot single-family home is really no longer affordable for these groups or affordable for developers. What the initial data is showing us is that while there is preference for single-family homes, like I said earlier, it's a demand for a different type of single-family home, which includes townhouses, row houses, and smaller lot developments. And we provided images here to explain what each of those, what that might mean, what that might look like. The graph that you see on the screen is a response, or the results from one of the survey questions about housing. And again, this is probably already outdated as survey responses are still coming in. But you can see that demand for single-family housing and then townhouses, and then also senior housing, this bar here in the pink, reaching almost 60% of survey respondents said we need more senior housing. And of course, senior housing can take a variety of forms. It can be single family, it can be multifamily, it can be institutional. And then there's a pretty good spread across those others. Yes, ma'am?
Came across this statistic, and I'm curious if you've seen it in your work. And with the two older generations at this point, I forget what's the generation prior to Boomer.
Greatest generation.
Yeah, we'll call it that. The greatest generation, there's about 40 million using assisted care, if you will. Well, the generation below, it's projected that there could be anywhere from 75 million to 80 million. That's doubling the system just on assisted care. I could be quoting the statistic wrong, but the theory still applies. When it comes to affordable housing for seniors, are you seeing more of a need for, I know you mentioned it briefly, but are you seeing more of a need for assisted care and retirement community? I would associate the Summit into that category if you've studied our city a little bit. Or are you seeing more, to what you said, townhome condo development for those age groups?
Darren might know better, but I think what we're seeing is that there's a demand across that spectrum, that there is a need for folks to have housing that they can progress through as their needs change. And affordability for seniors is just about the affordability of the house, but it's also about the services that are being provided in these communities. Darren, I don't know if you have more to add to that.
It's all of it, all of the above, and you can see the fuchsia, the pink bar is indicating. I mean, the people who are taking this survey are probably thinking, in the next 5 or 10 years, I'm going to need this, and it'd be nice if there was more of it. I think of a continuum of care, and I think some of the most successful kind of mixed-use senior neighborhoods I've seen, you start out in a single-family attached dwelling where you're on your own, and then you move into the assisted living facility that's, a couple blocks away in the same development, and then from there into more of an advanced care depending on the need. And so, you do your financial planning to get into that, buy into that, and then that's where, you live the remainder of your days. To me, that's a model that I've seen in some of our client communities that works well, but it's really anything across the spectrum. I mean, my dad, right, is 77. He lives in a 55 and older community. He's like, hey, in 2 years, you can come live here too. And I'm like, yeah, thanks for the invite. I'll just come see you. You're 45 minutes away. But, and everybody there walks and gets together and does their activities. But when people move from there, it's typically into an assisted living facility or a nursing home facility for more advanced care. And this is in the Richmond area, so it's, it's a larger market. But it's literally everything, and there's a demand for all of it, and it's just across the spectrum. I mean, my dad is in better shape than I am, which is a low bar, I admit, but he walks all the time. But there are other people in his community that they need around the clock care that comes in home, et cetera, et cetera. So it's everything.
One thing I'd ask, and as you move into the one-on-ones with the mayor and vice mayor and city council members, is bring them a bit of context. We're a college town. We've got 5 schools of higher education, and we regularly wrestle. You saw some of the, rents, I think, were one of the things as a weakness, and thinking about growth. And we hear development as a desire for single-family residential that butts up against what financiers are lending on, which are, apartment complexes that they can kind of extrapolate and get that return that they need. Helpful, I think, is to take what's happening maybe and bring them context of what's happening in Charlottesville, what's happening in other college towns in the Commonwealth that they're considering as part of their comprehensive plan, so a part of their zoning components, are moving into areas that they hadn't been previously, as far as areas that were maybe zoned a certain thing and they're zoning it different, because Charlottesville's 10 square miles and they're largely meeting capacity, and the average median house is about $500,000 or more. And so in thinking about that, how does that kind of resonate here in Lynchburg? So as you move into these one-on-ones, maybe thinking through that, because important for everyone on this dais, but particularly Ward 3 and Ward 4, is that tension that they have between what a desire for single-family residential and then also what's kind of what financiers are lending on, which are apartment kind of complexes as opposed to townhomes. And what you're seeing to get the development kind of return is a mix, right? Like you said, that proposing maybe some single-family residential around something with multifamily in the middle or around it to help kind of monetize that land. So that's just a request of mine as you move into educating council about where people are moving within the Commonwealth. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
We're working with Albemarle County currently, so in their growth areas, they're dealing with the same thing City of Charlottesville's dealing with. We have got experience with Blacksburg, Lexington, so the whole spectrum, from small to large. But what we're going to want to know from each of you when we're meeting with you is what's on your mind? What's the tolerance politically for different types of housing, for different types of senior housing, et cetera, across the spectrum of these issues? I mean, all of these issues, everything that has been brought up and will be brought up, everything that you've mentioned that hasn't been brought up, it's all about quality of life. Right? And one of the things you're going to see here in a minute, spoiler alert, is there's a lot of civic pride in Lynchburg. Y'all know this. People love this city. They love their home. It's their home. And all of this is about quality of life. And that's what makes this so important, but it's also what makes it so much fun, is because a lot of people in this city do live a good life. How can it be better? A lot of people in this city aren't living their best life. How could it be better? And so that's what this whole conversation revolves around. And so what are your thoughts? That's what's, you're the governing body. You're the steward of this plan. And so based on what you tell us, we will then be able to use that lens. We'll be able to have that two-way conversation. But then the recommendations that will flow out of this process will reflect back what we feel, from our professional opinion, is most appropriate for your community based on the feedback we've received from you. So it's a fun, interesting, effective process that results in a really functional, implementable plan.
I know there's so much more we could talk about, but we only have a limited amount of time this morning. All right, the next topic is transportation and connectivity, and the image that you're seeing on a screen is a screenshot of the interactive map that is on the Lynchburg Together website. And this is one of those additional interactive elements that I talked about earlier in the presentation. And each of the points, I guess they're actually light bulbs that you're seeing on this map, is a comment left by a community member. And almost all of those points point to a transportation challenge in the city. They identify a dangerous intersection, maybe where a crosswalk is needed, where there's some sidewalks or trail connectivity that's needed. And we put this up here because this is a good snapshot. It reflects pretty much everything we've heard through the survey and the workshops thus far. And that is that the multimodal network needs to be better connected and that there are key vehicular safety concerns in various areas in the city. I believe some of these projects are actually identified as VDOT project, or VDOT has identified as projects already, but it's important to note that one of the key scoring criteria for VDOT's Smart Scale program is whether or not a project appears in a community's comprehensive plan. So that is one of the most important reasons that we go through these planning processes, is to hear, okay, what are these key projects, these transportation issues, and how can we identify them in the comprehensive plan so that we can then leverage resources and funding to actually get them done. Thoughts about this? Questions? I think this is one of the more straightforward issues that we've seen.
The acceleration lanes is spot on. I mean,
I've experienced it myself just traveling down here, yep.
Intersection challenges. Schul's Heritage is one that comes to mind. I just got a concern about Oddfellows Road. And again, I'm sorry for hounding this one, but we're interesting city in the sense that we do have some neighborhoods that you can only access by leaving the city and then coming back in. And Windhurst is a prime example of that. And just last night, it took me close to 15 minutes at the Lakeside Drive, Enterprise Drive intersection, which I'm in technically in Bedford County, to turn left to go into Enterprise. And there's, quote, nothing the city can do about that because that's under the jurisdiction of Bedford, which is VDOT. But that's impacting city residents and businesses who live in that area. So that there are very, very Lynchburg-specific items, I believe, that are highlighted there, and I would certainly concur with them.
That was a great point, thank you. Jotting notes over here as you guys are talking. All right, the next topic is natural resources and the environment. And what we've heard is that Lynchburg's setting, its natural beauty, recreational amenities, again, they consistently come up as one of the city's biggest strengths and an area where the city is already doing really good work, such as the Linkhorn Trailhead, which there's a picture of on the screen. But the question, the conversation that we've heard through community engagement thus far is, okay, well, how can we ensure that these areas and these assets continue to be protected and enhanced so that we can leverage them for community improvement, for school improvement, linking parks, trails, and schools, as well as economic growth and tourism development? I'll give you all a chance to think about that. Any thoughts or comments, questions? I'll move on then. All right, the next is economic growth and investment. Another area where thus far what we've been hearing is that the city has a lot of efforts and assets that are working well, working to the city's advantage. People feel the city is marketing itself well, downtown, Liberty, the riverfront, all assets that draw people here. And the city is leveraging incentive programs well, such as enterprise zones. But again, there's always more opportunity to do more and to be more proactive or to be more comprehensive and forward-thinking in your strategies. Some of the things that folks have been saying in the public engagement so far is the idea of recruiting businesses that complement existing business clusters. Whoever wrote that clearly knows economic development. Addressing gaps in education and housing that affect the ability to attract and retain a workforce. I think we talked about this earlier, that these are all interrelated issues, and we can't address one really without addressing the other, and I think that's what this comment is acknowledging. And then looking ahead to the digital economy and making sure that the city is planning for 21st century industries and jobs. Any questions or thought on this?
I think that's one of the things I thought about is we have these 5 universities, and we have all these all the talent coming out of them, or colleges, universities, and all the talent coming out of them, and our median age is 28. And how do we retain the talent that we're producing out of Lynchburg so that we can maximize those young people and keep them here to raise their families? And what are we doing and not doing to do that other college cities and towns are able to do to keep them there? And how do we better market ourselves to do so? And of course, that's going to be jobs. So how do we do a better job between economic development and our regional business alliance? And I know they're working at it, but attracting the types of jobs that would retain that talent so that we can keep those young people here rather than losing them to other cities. So that's something I know I talk quite a bit about, and I think that's something we should look further into. And with the digital economy, I mean, IT is such a huge thing. That's something that even in an old city like ours, you don't have to have you don't have to make a lot of modifications to old buildings or anything to accommodate what an IT type of industry would need, or business would need. We have CloudFit software here in the city that took one of our old buildings and made some modifications to make it techie, but still preserve the integrity of the historical building. But they didn't have to make any adjustments to that. Some businesses have had to come in, or we've lost bids to, because we just couldn't accommodate some of their needs. Some of these, the tech industry doesn't need that. So I think looking at how we can maybe look at those businesses and say, how can we be competitive there would be a smart move.
When you say you can accommodate some of their needs, specifically, what are you referring to?
Yeah, space, just being, I know that Winter can probably speak better to that in some of those opportunities that we've lost, but I know that's been some of the issues that we've had of just space issues and some of the aged structures and things like that have just tossed us out of the running for some things, as far as I know. Go ahead.
We have Alec Brebner here, who's part of our Planning District Commission, and Megan Lucas, who's with LRBA. She's traveling. She's going to be here a little bit later. And Margette Upshur, who's our Economic Development Director. She took a well-deserved vacation this week. But I'll try to jump into that mix. What we find, as with anything, is that you talked about chicken egg, and I think it was the Vice Mayor who recognized, development of a spec building of a certain size, and how do you have something? Is it build it and you will come, or is it you will come and then we'll build it? And so those are the things that localities wrestle with, is on timing. And the mayor is absolutely right that we have a certain age of infrastructure, but also topography being what it is. The spaces sometimes, we have quite a bit of space that we share with Campbell County that's immediately adjacent to our airport, and that looking to develop it, the wealth of which is kind of on this slope kind of thing. So when we build, we have to be creative. And so to the degree that we can lean into those areas and help, and it's always that proper, what's the incentive on the backside or on the front side to help kind of encourage that.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts or questions? We have one more topic we'll cover before we move on to next steps. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We will have conversations next week, more detailed, and then there'll be ample other opportunities to delve into these issues. All right, the final, yes.
I don't know if it's a question for you guys or if it's a question for Winter, but we hear a lot about that median age being 28.6 in the city, and talking about the economic growth and development and stuff like that. But there's a lot more to that number, right? Because 25% of the population is not even adults, and then what percentage of that population are college students that really have no intention of staying here? And I think that looking at that piece differently, just if there's a different way that we can look at that and get that information just to see what that really looks like, I think that would be helpful in guiding some of these conversations.
We'll be sure to look into that. Making that note. Okay. Final theme is city character and development, and this will end on a high note. And the key takeaway is that residents love the city of Lynchburg, and that is their words, not ours. We've heard that consistently throughout the workshops. There's a clear acknowledgement that there is a distinct sense of community and identity to the city, and that cultural amenities play an important role in that, including the downtown and historic areas. And much like recreation, these are assets that are important not only to the people that live here as quality of life amenities, but they are also amenities that have the ability to leverage tourism and to bring folks in for economic growth and development. There's also the acknowledgement that as the city is leveraging these assets, that there's a need to ensure that neighborhoods, your everyday spaces, your everyday places, the places people live and work on an everyday level, are safe and healthy. And community members have talked about achieving that through improving accessibility by property maintenance and upkeep, by improving or redeveloping underutilized properties as needed. Questions or thoughts?
I would note that I think that's an interesting parallel to need for safe, family-friendly neighborhoods. I believe that's an interesting parallel to development and when, where, and how. Particularly in Wards 3 and 4, in these last 3.5 years, albeit they've been sometimes contentious, and I've expressed my opposition on behalf of those I represent. The developments, some of them have been, right on the property line. In some cases, setbacks not followed, or 5-story apartment building right on top of a neighborhood that's been there for 55 years. So I think that parallel needs to be considered when we're talking about incentivizing development of what type, but also where.
When we talk about development and land use through the comprehensive planning process, we talk about it horizontally and vertically. So where, and also how, what it looks like, what it feels like. So certainly things that we will consider. And then that'll give you great foundation for updating your zoning ordinance to make sure that it's meeting your city's goals.
Addressed.
I'm sorry, say that.
Food deserts.
I do not know that has come up yet, but certainly in community health and wellness, that is a key component. We have heard, I say that, but now that I'm thinking about it, we have heard some conversation about where grocery stores are accessible, that the biggest grocery stores are pretty far drive from a lot of neighborhoods. So yes, it has, to amend my first answer, yes, it has come up.
Could I follow up and ask, do you have specific geographies in mind that we should pay close attention to?
Yes, Ward 2. Yes, in the Diamond Hill, White Rock neighborhoods, Darrington. Yes. So.
That last one?
Likely say Campbell Avenue, just the corridor, yeah.
Thank you. That level of specificity, even at this high level, will help.
Communities that definitely need grocery stores.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on to next steps. Obviously, next steps are interviews with you all, with city council members next week, where we'll get to talk about these topics and others, again, in more detail. We will continue with the 2 workshops, and we will also be conducting focus groups. We have 8 focus groups slated. We're still scheduling those, but focus groups are, as they sound, an opportunity to bring together industry experts, community leaders, to talk about specific topics in detail. We will be, like I said, scheduling those and organizing those in the coming weeks. We'll also complete the existing conditions analysis, and then once public engagement is complete, compile the public engagement summary for review. And those documents will be the basis for beginning drafting the plan, which will start in winter of this coming year. So thank you all very much. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to talk about additional opportunities for engagement.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. My name is Rachel Frischhausen. I'm the interim city planner. I just want to thank the Berkeley Group again. We're so glad to have them on board, adding to sort of our own planning staff's expertise. Something Catherine always mentions in the workshop that rings true for me is that they are the planning experts, but our citizens are the Lynchburg experts. So I just really want to echo the importance of the community involvement in this project. And we are so excited to welcome everyone to RS Payne tomorrow that I hope you're watching and making plans to attend right now. Again, that's December 2nd, tomorrow, 1 p.m. at RS Payne. And there is also another workshop on December 14th at Perrymont, 6 p.m. And if you can't make it to one of the workshops, we also have our public survey, which is accessible through the website lynchburgtogether.com. Again, the survey is valuable, and there's a really neat interactive map where you can just drop points and tell us where you think issues or opportunities or something you want to see is. So this QR code, if you're watching at home, will take you to that survey. And I just want to thank Council again for having us today and for the public's involvement in this process.
Yes,
how long do I get out?
build in a break, and we can, I proposed 15-minute break, which would have us back here at 11 sharp, if that's okay with the group.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
All right, thank you. We are now moving into the budget and public engagement session. So, Ms. Donna Witt, our CFO, go ahead.
This is really, when I say first look, I mean this is really a first look. Our budget submissions from departments aren't due till next week, so the budget staff, months ahead of that, we already start looking at revenues and that type of thing. So this is very early on in our process. So right now, what we're seeing for our 25 operating budget is our 25 revenues. What we're thinking is we're going to have some growth, but what we're seeing is some things have already started slowing down. I know Greg shared with the Finance Committee on Tuesday, so I know you all were able to hear what the Secretary of Finance said at our legislative outlook, and we're really seeing the same type of revenue slowdown that the state's seeing. One thing that's interesting about Lynchburg is people eat out. Even in the last recession in 2009, our meals tax revenues never dropped to the point as our sales tax did, because I think people are busy and they continue to eat out. So they do find money to eat out. So right now, our economic trends are showing that we are seeing a little bit of slowdown. And our very first revenue projections, we work with Mitch Knuckles heavily and Jeff Bandy to look at all of our revenues. And we've kind of had a first couple of meetings, and what we put together, we're showing conservative growth. But we may, as we look at these further, we may have to back them up just a little bit. So that's kind of where we are. And these are the revenues that were shared with the Finance Committee on Tuesday. You'll see sales tax. Our actual to adopted, we are ahead, but you'll note that it's not the continued growth that we were seeing month over month in the last couple of years. I believe we're kind of coming to the end of our COVID revenues, and that things are just starting to slow down a little bit. So when you see actual 24 to 23, you'll see that we're like right on it. So we're not seeing much growth there compared to 23. And then on our meals tax, we're up $145,000 over budget. We're up $266,000 over 2023. But again, our meals tax revenues, we all know that a cost of a meal has gone up a lot, and that people really continue to eat out is what we've seen. Our lodging tax has, it's still up over last year, but we're not quite meeting our projections. I'm very thankful and excited for the football game tonight, because I think our hotels are going to be full tonight. So that's all good news. And then our amusement tax is also, we're right flat with our projections, and coming in right at where we were for 23. But things are not booming like they were at this time last year. So we're just cautiously watching. For our operating budget, our funding priorities right now, we're looking at to maintain our current operations with the required inflationary impact. We have a lot of contracts that have a built-in percentage for inflation or year-over-year increases that we've got to look at. Of course, we will fund our scheduled debt service on our current debt. We do anticipate that VRS percentage is going to go up slightly. It basically does every 2 years. So we're thinking, hopefully it won't be more than 2%. And then the modest general wage increase based on market, we'll be trying to fit that in for staff. And then, of course, the planned progression pay that council voted for public safety. and then add funding for maintenance projects in the operating budget. I think this is important as we see, I don't think our revenues are going to be what they were. I don't think our year end is going to look like it has looked through these COVID years. So I think we've got to really pay attention to our maintenance and make sure we're taking care of our buildings and making sure all that's done. So there's never been money budgeted in the operating fund. That's not how we've done things. But I think it's time to really start looking at using some ongoing revenues for our maintenance projects, just to make sure we've got some in there for emergencies and to keep things going. That is our first look at the operating budget. Any questions? Happy to.
Councilman Hubbard?
I see that you have on here anticipated VRS increasing. You know, just a few days ago, we spoke with the airport, and they came up and talked about outsourcing and how that actually saved, and privatizing some elements actually saved taxpayer resources. The higher the VRS contributions go, the bigger the cost in VRS, the better the benefit to privatize. Hopefully in this budget, we can start looking at some things that could be privatized. Another item that I think is of equal or very worthy of note, in this upcoming budget, just like we've seen over the last 25 years, we have another decline in school enrollment. The numbers just came out, 140 less students, which over the last quarter of a century, that means about 2,100 less kids in the school system than they were 25 years ago. Same number of buildings, same, increased in staff and whatnot. I think, I was very delighted, and I think all of us were as well, when we saw the budget that was presented for schools by Councilmember Mischens last year, and that we all voted for, which was very good. We need to make sure that we begin, and the schools begin, consolidating. I mean, we're down 2,100 kids in the last 25 years. And again, another 140, the most recent September 30 enrollment numbers. And it's way past time, to quit kicking the can. We need to make sure that we're efficient, make sure that we shutter some buildings that need to be shuttered, make sure that the resources are used very efficiently. I get it, we can play, politics and whatnot. But these are real issues that affect our taxpayers, that affect the city, that affect other items that could be utilized much more efficiently. And that, we've got to take action.
With Mr. Hagelson on his first comment about the retirement system. Mr. Hagelson, my takeaway is to look at areas that we can privatize, but not particularly in retirement. Is that?
No, I'm not talking about retirement. I'm talking about the compensation.
It is very expensive. Yeah.
The compensation package. So when you privatize, the higher the VRS, which is required, that's part of the compensation package of city employees. It's not the compensation package for private companies. Private companies don't have that cost. They can actually hire people, pay them a higher wage, give them better benefits that they would actually appreciate. Basically a pension plan, most of those went out in the 70s. The only ones that still have a fully funded defined benefit pension plan are typically governments. Lots of them have changed because your new employee thinks about their pay more than they think about long-term benefits. They think about their 401k or their 403b as opposed to saying, well, if I stay with this company for 25 or 30 years, then I will get these benefits. The VRS benefits bake into the cake the cost of compensation for each employee, whether they like that or not. Now, we privatize that. I'm not saying privatize the benefit. I'm saying that when we privatize and outsource some of the features or some of the, like the airport, as he presented in his quarterly report, saving tens of thousands of dollars just by outsourcing custodial services. because you can pay a custodial company to manage and to do. And that's something and we talked about on Tuesday, that's in the airport, which is very secure area. And if they can privatize in the airport, certainly we can privatize in other places, so.
Segueing on that, I want to touch on one piece that Councilmember Helgeson mentioned was with the consolidation. I know that I've had conversations with Mr. Benda about this, but really, when it comes to efficiency, one of the things we need to be looking at is where are we overlapping with Lynchburg City Schools and the city of Lynchburg? What departments or functions of both of those organizations can we consolidate to be more efficient with those tax dollars? So that is something to consider as well. I know we've had this conversation, and I know it's a lot to chew on per se, but as the school division enters their budget process and we enter our budget process, we really need to take a look at that. Because do we really need to be paying for, 2 entire departments of grounds employees and all the equipment and trucks and vehicles associated with that? Does that make sense as far as?
The areas that we're going to focus on in the impending year, and I'm looking at Greg, or probably finance and fleet. Those seem to be the most immediate intersects as far as the buildings and grounds, and some of the other ones, we can look at those, but I think the most immediate synergies are in those 2 different areas. So we're going to come back in early we're going into 24? 24, ahead of the budget process and talk to you about some of those opportunities.
That sounds great, because I think that anywhere we can do that's going to present an extraordinary opportunity for us to be really efficient with those dollars and just continue to go down that road.
Yes, being a former school board member as well as city council, over the past several years, we have always, especially in our vice mayor's, mayor meetings, as well as school board chair, they've always talked about consolidation. And to see, again, it's always a conversation, to see what we can do to work better together, to see what we can do to make sure our resources are efficiently used. So there's always been a consistent conversation, yes. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Faraldi?
I think as far as the forecast, it's certainly similar, as you said, to what was coming from Richmond. And yet, I do think there are opportunities for this council to meet priorities that we all share, even some that have already been articulated. I do recall last year, a priority of mine was to address tax relief through those who don't own real estate. And council did ultimately decide otherwise, and yet I would hope that if we're going to explore that path, there's 2 categories I would really want to target, and first and foremost would be the car tax. I do believe we should be talking about making sure that is lower. I mean, the fact that on a used vehicle right now, you're paying hundreds of dollars because of the assessed value. I think that's something that we should have targeted last year that we missed the mark on, but be that as it may, I think that's something worth considering. Whether or not we do it is another topic. The numbers work out, of course, but I think should be a priority in how we guide the budget. Depending on what we do on other categories later in the program today, we'll consider some of those. Not saying we do all of this, but things to consider. The meals tax, as Ms. Witt did articulate, we're getting more and more out of it simply because the cost of a hamburger has gone up. Again, that's something that I did propose we consider changing last year, and council did think otherwise. As far as the things that hit people the most on a broad basis, that's what I hope we can consider for the upcoming budget. And the final component of it is, I know we did talk about it briefly, and we didn't do much on it last year, but what options are there for tax relief for seniors? Is there an opportunity for that? Costs are going up for everybody, but most of the seniors in this city, maybe they're not working. Social Security ain't cutting it, and dollars are finite. So if there is opportunity, what would that look like? And again, I want to stress that may not mean we do all of it, but what options are on the table for us to take a look at for considering the residents of this city, first and foremost. Coupled with that, you better believe I want to see us continue with the planned progression for public safety, and I want to see us making sure we're doing cost of living adjustments for our employees, no doubt. It's a hard balance we're going to have to work through next year. But that's, I think, what we're all here to do, is to take on these hard issues and act on them. So as sharing my initial reflections of what you've articulated today, that's kind of my perspective moving into this. Is we did good work last year on some of council's priorities, but I think others mine, if you will, are to be desired, and those would be some of them.
I like the idea of saving, putting money aside for the building maintenance. I think that's important. I mean, we would do that for our own homes, and it's important to have a savings account for maintaining your own home. So we need to be doing that for the city. I think that's a smart and wise decision. So I would support whatever needs to be done to add that to a budget line, or however, new category or whatever, however that process would go. I think that's very wise. So anyone else?
I think some of the
Councilman Helgeson?
on the maintenance and whatnot can be easily done by foregoing some new expenses. I mean, we have an idea or have a grandiose plan to spend another $8 million on an amphitheater. One element would be easy to utilize that $8 million to start, to kickstart the maintenance. I mean, I recognize that's one-time money, but we have $4.5 million of ARPA, another $3.5 million of other money, and that it's going to be something new that's going to have to be then maintained, which is going to increase the maintenance budget future, rather than using some of those resources, foregoing the glitz and the glamour of saying, oh, wow, this would be neat to have something, a nice new shiny little object that we can talk about or act like it's a benefit to the city. We can actually use those resources, forego some expending on a new project that's going to require more maintenance. Let's utilize some of the resources we have to maintain the stuff we have. I hear from people all over Ward 3 and across the city with regarding sidewalks on Leesville Road. I hear about people talking about their roads. I hear about our city manager and what Steve Newman said last week with regarding the possibility for smart scale. Some of those monies are not going to be there. Let's not be going off on a limb on spending more money on niceties rather than the operations, rather than maintaining the current things. Those are necessities that we need to do. So that means saying yes to certain things means we're saying no to others. So I hope we will consider that as well in this, as we're crafting this upcoming budget. Last year, I think, was a great first step in lowering, finally, the burdens on our taxpayers with regarding the real estate tax. That needs to continue. Lots of those items, when we lower the burden on our citizens, it may be an ephemeral dip in revenue, but for the most part, you're actually seeing the opposite. When we lower those rates, we have a blossoming, an increase in amount of revenue, because people are now saying, hey, this isn't a bad place. This isn't a place that just is going to say, we're going to tax you and tax you and tax you. But we have a majority on council that says, we're going to actually look out for the taxpayers. And when that happens, more people start to invest. More people start to say, I've talked to lots of realtors that say, don't buy here because they keep on taxing you. Buy in the neighboring counties. Now when they're saying the opposite, that's a good thing, and that helps property values. So let's keep on working on lowering those real estate tax rates for people's investments. Some of the last places that I would want to see the rates cut would be on consumption type things. Typically you have the federal tax brackets have less for capital gains because there's the benefit of the investment. And so capital assets, lowering the burdens, the tax burdens on capital assets where people are investing, I think that's a very good first step.
Vice Mayor Feraldi?
I think Councilman raises some rather fair points. on a broad sense, but I think specifics are important. I don't believe the proposal we're going to be considering later today for, or at least being educated on, I would say, is the amphitheater. The direct cost locally that's being considered is somewhere around 3 million, not 8, but we'll get the specifics on that later. So I'll be happily admitting I'm wrong on that point if needed. I would disagree. I do think we're getting eaten alive on consumption taxes right now, and if there was opportunity to adjust those, the majority of those who live in apartments in the city, 52% of our residents do or don't own their property, we're going to have a very strong impact there, and I think that's worth considering. And to what I said earlier, if that means we don't go that direction, then we don't. But we need to consider it, and I would be in favor of doing that without question. And I would also note, being a realtor, it would actually be very, very, very disingenuous of a realtor to steer someone to live in a certain area by the taxes in one area versus not. That's something that the client would certainly have to make on their own decision, but that would actually be a prompt reason for them to lose their license.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. Mr. Patrick?
We are attacking the next portion of the presentation on budget engagement this year.
Can't hear you.
We're going to attack the next portion on budget engagement. This year ahead of budget, we want to get out and meet with our residents and give them some good information on how the budget process works, how a budget's put together, some of the rules and regulations around budgeting in Virginia and in the city of Lynchburg. It's a question we have heard a lot. How does the budget process work, and how do I participate? So we've put together a presentation that we're going to take on the road. We've got a number of stops already scheduled to really do some education around the budget process ahead of council's budget development season this year. Donna's going to walk you through the presentation that we will make to some of the organizations we're going to meet with. And then we have an activity that's hopefully both fun and informative that we'll go through as a group when Donna is complete. But with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Witt.
Thanks, Greg. And I will say thanks heavily to Anna and Greg in helping put this together. Through my 20 years of budgeting here, we've really struggled with how to get information to citizens. And I'm really proud of this. I think this is something that we put together based on a lot of the questions that we received. This will be very elementary to most of you. You all know this information, but we feel like this is where we get the most questions from citizens. And so that's why we put this presentation together, but we want to make sure you know what we're out there saying. So we want to talk about basically just how do we put together a budget? And as I mentioned before, we're already looking at our revenue projections. We look at what the economic outlook is, what's going on in Lynchburg, and also any of the trends that we see. And then, of course, we have to look at the expenditure side, which is our inflation, staffing, equipment, and program needs. And then we put all this together, but we have to take in consideration what's the priorities. And like we talked about, and thank you all for your input, because City Council's priorities are really where comes raises to the top. So that's how we put all of this together. Our overall concepts and definitions. A lot of our citizens don't understand the council manager form of government. They don't understand, Richmond has a strong mayor form of government. And so we just want to make sure that just general information that they understand how we put things together. Our fiscal year is July to June, which most people don't think in those terms. They think of January to December. So we like to make sure they understand what our fiscal year is. And then we get a lot of questions about how schools are funded. And of course, they're funded through state, federal, as well as the city. But a lot of times people don't understand that and they think all the money comes from the city. So we want to make sure that we're providing this information. And of course, everything we do is based on state code. So this is the code section that gives us our outline for the budget. The city manager's proposed budget has to go to council no later than April 1st. It must be balanced. And then the funds must be appropriated, which, as you know, mostly happens within the adoption of the budget. Also, these are other questions that we get. Is the Dillon rule versus the home rule? And you all know the Dillon rule means that we don't get to do anything unless the state allows us to do that. So, and we get a lot of questions about that. The general fund versus the enterprise funds. It's helpful when people understand the enterprise funds, which is water, sewer, stormwater, and airport, are funded by the fees that they charge, and that there's no money coming from the general fund to support that. And a lot of people don't understand that. And when you say general fund, those are our major departments. That's your public safety, public works, and the core that kind of holds it all together. And then what's the difference between the operating budget versus the capital improvement program and the funding there for both of those? And we get a lot of questions about that. And then how do we actually build the budget? So, of course, we put our revenues together, and then we look at our expenditures based on what our departments submit, and we compare those, and generally there's a gap. We don't get to go shopping much. There's generally a gap. And then to close that gap, we've got options: raise revenue, reduce service levels, consider initiatives, department equipment needs, and ongoing maintenance. So we kind of have to put that balance in there based on this criteria. So, and then the capital improvement program, as you all are aware, the buildings, transportation, parks and rec, economic development, and school facilities are our large areas in our capital program. And then our budget calendar, December 1st, today, we're having our council retreat. January, we're going to do our budget engagement and actually put our budget together, working with the city manager. And then March 12th, we plan to present the city manager's proposed budget to you. And then in March, we'll be doing budget and brews like we did last year, and just answer any citizen questions based on the manager's proposed budget. I like to add that we also have budget and pews. We were at Diamond Hill Baptist Church. There was no brews, but we did have pews. And those have been really helpful. People seem to like to come out and just get the overall what's in the budget, what's it mean, that type of thing, and have opportunity to ask their questions in a very relaxed environment. So those have gone well. And then, of course, you'll have your work sessions through May, and we'll have a public hearing that's usually the beginning of April. And then adopt the budget in May or June. By state code, it has to be adopted before the start of the next fiscal year. So that's, as you're aware, this is our budget calendar. So we also like to let citizens know, how can you really be heard? Citizens want to know, how do I speak? And they can watch council and stay informed, watch your meetings. You can stream it on Facebook, the website, sign up to speak at a council meeting. And then in March and April, again, we'll have these budget engagement events, and they can also attend the public hearing. We're going to give them your names and wards so that they know who they need to contact. And then our schedule for December, this budget game that we're going to engage you in here in a minute is going to be available to the public on our website, social media, and as a press release. And then in January and February, as Greg has mentioned, we're going to go on the road. And we've already got some places that have asked us to come to walk through this presentation and engage the public. And then, as I mentioned, in March, we'll do our budget and brews. So, as most of you know, I am a huge college basketball fan. And so we have put together a March, well, it's not a March, but a budget madness bracket. So Greg and Anna are going to walk you through how we're going to play our game. So, turn it over to Anna and Greg.
Question, how is it?
You know, I think last year it was very different than what was adopted by a majority of council. With that, it created lots of unnecessary angst in the community. We had people protesting outside of City Hall because they heard in these budget and brews that, oh my goodness, if you lower the tax rate like council had said we were going to, set the tax rate at 89 cents, that there would be riots in the street, there would be defaults, there would be all sorts of things, or whatever was told, where they came out and spoke in droves. And it caused a lot of unnecessary angst because those budget and brews were presented in a way that was totally different than what the governing body actually adopted. So I would just hope that if those budget and brews are still going forward, that they'll be vastly different than last year, because it created lots of undue problems. We had 3 protests outside of City Hall that said, oh, well, you can't lower the taxes because X, Y, and Z. It's so desperately needed. That isn't the way we should be governing. We should be recognizing that the budget is decided and adopted by a majority of the governing body, that these items are not just going to be, you know, political theater or pawns, but they're actual reality. And with that, it seemed like I've never seen a budget session or calendar that went that way. A majority decided what the tax rate was. We said, prepare a budget with that. Make sure that it's sustainable. Make sure that it's good. But yet we heard lots of things from citizens because of that. So I don't know if that budget brews is a good thing, but if you're still going forward with that, if people think that it's a fabulous thing, I just sure hope that those budget and brew sessions are tempered with the fact that who's adopting it is the governing body, a majority of the governing body. And I think the majority of the governing body has been elected on the fact that taxes have been too high. Where can we have efficiencies? Where can we have public safety being strong? Where can we make sure that we're not spending money inefficiently? So with that being the case, if they still go forward, I do hope they go forward differently than last year, because there was a lot of unnecessary angst. I mean, this budget has been very good. We're looking at our reports and saying, yeah, we're still over and above, not growing as fast as it was before, but those numbers, even with those lower tax rates, it's actually, we still have a cushion in the budget. We still have a surplus. So I do hope that that'll be tempered next year. So thank you.
Dr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you. I attended most of them, and they were more so led by city staff and where citizens could ask questions. So I didn't see anything rowdy at any of those meetings. It was just persons coming, citizens, they're taxpayers, coming to get information on the budget and ask questions from the city manager, finance team, and all the city staff that was there. They were just asking them questions about the budget, the draft budget that had been prepared. Thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Yeah, I also think one of them, and I think there's really nothing wrong with that, having the citizens express their vision, their viewpoint about the city. And I thought they were presented really, really well. And of course, you're always going to have people that are going to disagree with the final outcome of whatever we do. That's, but I think what you're presenting here, this format in terms of education of the citizen, I think is really fantastic. You do that before and then you get your questions. I think it's a great way to do it. Thank you.
Councilman Mischins?
One thing, and, kind of dovetailing a little bit on what Dr. Wilder actually just said about the opportunity for citizens to ask questions and be more informed, that I think we have room for improvement on the process and the way that we develop this budget is I don't think the appropriate venue for our department heads and our constitutional officers to come present their case for us is in a public hearing. I've been watching these meetings for many years prior to when I was elected, and there was opportunity for the department heads and the constitutional officers to actually come and engage and have Q&A with the governing body, and I think that that is important, and that's something that needs to come back, because what we get from a 3 to 5 minute presentation in a public hearing and having no opportunity to really engage with them right there as a governing body, I think that we actually kind of dismiss those individuals and don't give them the opportunity to really give us the understanding of maybe why they're asking for something, and that is something I believe needs to come back. I know previously the way that the budget process used to work, there was a thing called the list, right? And we would go through, the city council would go through it line by line, department, program, and things would get put on the list, and then they would come off the list. There was nothing like that in this past year, and I think that that would be a prudent thing to come back, because that's a real good way for us to come together however the majority chooses on funding certain items. So that's just my take, and I'd like to see some improvement in that area in the process moving forward.
I loved the Budget and Brews. I went to all four, and as I think the only person on council that went to all four, all they were the staff giving the proposed budget that came up that our city manager put together, and were informative. And then all the citizens that came in all four wards asked questions. There was no contention. It was wonderful. It was great. There was a lot of back and forth, really supportive. All the feedback I heard was great, and nothing that I'm aware of came from those that was negative. And from what I recall, we can go back and look in the records, but I believe that the protests happened after the 89-cent rate was voted on, and that was the result of the protest. So I've never seen or heard anything about those protests being related to the Budget and Brews, and I think I've heard positive responses that the community was able to go to their wards and have that exchange and have that opportunity to be briefed. And I went the year before. I only went to one. The one at Diamond Hill Baptist. But again, that was well attended also, and people appreciated the opportunity to be able to engage with the city management. So I think it's a good thing. I think it was well done. I didn't ever see anybody that was angry after they left. I mean, there were definitely some tough questions that people had about their priorities that they definitely let us all see, where you could see where people were focusing, whether it was taxes or if it was housing. I mean, we saw all those questions coming up, but nobody left ready to start picket signs. So I thought it was great. I think it's a good thing, and I'll support it again. But let's try this game. Oh, Vice Mayor Farley, go ahead.
Sorry. Just because I know some folks contacted me in the past, earlier this year, and used it as a critique that I didn't attend, and actually for what it's worth, I intentionally didn't do so. I didn't want to influence the process at all. I wanted city staff and the community to be able to engage on the intent behind the program, and I knew I would certainly have my own time to sift through with city staff on it. So for whatever it's worth, I wanted folks to know that's why I didn't go. But if the City Hall wants to facilitate it, I think it's something that they can do, and certainly go forward with it. I do believe Councilmember Helgeson may have some fair points. There's some things to consider with how it is presented and rolls together with council has a path they may go, and it may be slightly different than the manager. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also something that the manager may advocate for that I didn't consider, that I might change my direction on. And so, with that, I think there's a healthy balance. It could certainly move forward on doing this. And I do commend City Hall for thinking outside the box and what's a way to engage those they're supposed to be working for. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's play the game.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do here live is, as Donna mentioned, a budget bracket challenge. It's designed to be similar to how a March Madness style bracket works. It is going to be live on the city's website next week, so individuals can play, and we'll record the responses there. We will also do this live when we do our budget engagement events. Anyone at home is seeing the slide that is up right now and can play along with us. Everyone in the room is encouraged to take part as well. It will use the same software format that we used for the comprehensive plan presentation this morning. It'll be significantly simpler, though. So we will go ahead and get started. Everyone should have at their place, if they didn't click on the screen, a QR code to use with their phone. So please go ahead and do that. The QR code will also stay up on the screen for anyone at home in the lower right-hand corner of the leftmost screen there. But here is the game, Budget Bracket Challenge. You first will come in, select your zip code. You have a choice between the City of Lynchburg zip codes and then other as well. I will tell you that as we go through this game, none of what we're doing here is scientific. If we were university professors and we were doing a research project, this data probably would not meet the requirements to go into any major scientific journal. That being said, it's a fun activity, and it does provide residents, anyone who's participating in it, an opportunity to think through some of the major city services that we provide. So we'll go ahead and go forward. Anna, we'll click Start. And here is the bracket. And you can see these are major programs and services that the city offers. There's 16 of them listed here. And the concept is, it's not what's most important. It is very simply, if the city had additional funding, in which of these programs would you like for the city to invest? And if Anna click on Park and Trails real quick, Anna. When you click on the program, it provides a little bit of additional information for anyone who's participating to be able to see and understand what they're voting on here. When we go all the way through the bracket, we'll hit Submit, and we'll see the results, and we'll be able to compare the results of this group's bracket to everyone else who will ultimately submit their brackets as well. Again, none of this is scientific. But it is an interesting way to get some feedback from our residents. If you look on the left, you're going to see basically there are two choices on Poll EV, funding option 1, funding option 2. They are going to correspond to the matchup that we are currently working on. So we're going to start with matchup number 1, Parks and Trails, which will be funding option 1, and Public Transportation, which will be funding option 2. So Anna, are we ready to vote? We're ready to vote. So everyone who's got the software up and loaded, let's go ahead and vote. We should get live results here.
Should get live results. We're not getting live results. Here, let me try option 2. Yeah. Why don't we go on to the next one, Greg, and let's try that one.
Next question? Yeah. All right. So we'll come back, but second, no live results?
No live results. Give me 1 second.
We'll give this one try, but we will not belabor it if it is.
Yeah. It should be correct. I'm so sorry. It shouldn't be a submit button. Let's just play it. Let's just play through the bracket, Greg. Let's play through the bracket.
So I think what we'll do, since we're not working, we won't do any background IT work. But Anna, if you would, just let's run through, not scientifically, just select various programs. I want to get to the submit button so folks can see how the results will work. And I don't want to poll the audience. This was so you can see some of the programs here. Are they the perfect 16 programs? Probably not, but they are major programs and services that folks are going to be very familiar with as we go through here. Of course, you'll get the matchups, again, will randomize every time somebody uses the activity. What you don't want is, police patrol services and excellent schools to match up in the first round every single time. That's going to skew the results. So they are completely random every time you hit play again or you play the game. And ultimately, we will have and we will reset. There's a couple of results from staff having just tested the system out, but you'll get to where you have your champion. We'll reset all those results before we go live. And you get some summary information. So what your Elite 8 was, what your Final 4 is, your Final 2, and then, of course, your champion. The graph and the table below is every time this is played, it is going to provide updated summary information. This first is which programs were the champion the most frequently. We expect this to be played hundreds, if not thousands of times, so we'll get some good information there. And then the aggregate points, right? So every time in your bracket, when programs advance to each round, there'll be aggregate points assigned to those rounds, so we can get a sense of, from a general ranking there, which programs advance most frequently. So that is, and then of course, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to play again. We're not limiting the number of times that people can play. Obviously, IT folks have the opportunity to make sure that there's not one IP address that's playing this 7,000 times. If that happens, we can kind of pull that out of the results. But again, it's a fun activity. It's got a positive premise. If there was additional funding, in which program would you invest? And we're going to collect this information, and we'll provide council updates regularly as to what the results are.
Can you have one of them that says if there's additional funding, the option is giving back to the taxpayers?
Sure.
I mean, you don't have that one on there.
We have not gone live with this. We have plenty of opportunities to.
I think that would be a good option.
Councilman Missions?
Question primarily for, I guess, for staff on this. One of the things I know that you and I discussed, I don't know if it was a one-on-one or wherever, from the process last year, because you gave us I think it was the flashcards, the big envelope with all the cards. I get a lot of questions, very intelligent questions from constituents on a regular basis, and I think our citizens are very, very intelligent. And to present this information, I think that it needs to be presented in a way where it shows what is a mandated service, right? What are we required as government to do? An example, one of the things that I saw up on there is Wi-Fi in public spaces, right? So I know it randomly selects the order in the first bracket every time. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they're not going to, aren't going to be.
So, I think that it would be prudent to make sure we make it clear to our citizens what mandated services are, because if somebody selects, for example, Wi-Fi in public spaces over, I don't know, zoning and code enforcement or public safety, they should know that we are required to provide the services they're selecting against and so forth. And just really making sure that there's more detailed information in there. And additionally, I know that I told you in the previous year that it would be good to see what are the mandated funding levels for things and where are we at now, right? So same thing with schools. What's the mandated local contribution for schools? What are we currently contributing to schools? So forth. I just think that our citizens are very wise, and they can make excellent informed decisions on providing this feedback to us and the city government, but we need to give them the information to be able to make those educated decisions.
So I would say that the activity is going to, it's not which programs would you fund if the government were new and we're starting up from scratch? It's going to assume current funding levels, and we'd make the assumption that whatever the mandated level of service that's required for each of our services is currently being met, right? And this question is, if the city had $10, $100, $1,000, $1 million in additional revenue capacity, in which of these programs would you like to see that investment made? So I hear you. From a comparison standpoint around, if we're looking at, especially if we're looking at reductions in services, those mandated service level questions are incredibly important. But the premise here is designed to be a little less, it's designed to be positive, right? We're going to assume that we're meeting all those mandated levels, and this would just be an additional level of service from what people are experiencing now when they answer these questions. So I hope that's helpful.
And it is, and thank you for that. And I think the thing that really caught me on that particular scenario is in the very beginning bracket, you had to choose between fire and EMS and schools, right? Guess what? Can't make that choice. They're both critically important, right? So when you rule out something so important in round one, it ends up essentially being what it is, a game, and doesn't provide us any valuable feedback.
So I'll tell you, that's the reason they randomize.
Mm-hmm.
If there were 5 people who participated, it's useless, right? But if you have 5,000 or 500, ultimately that randomization is going to create matchups that are in aggregate fairly fair, and that's why we have those relative point values assigned to each round. So you're right. Fire and EMS and excellent schools is going to be frustrating to people if they get in the first round. But at the same time, there's a play again feature. So folks can come back and randomize those matchups, and it's going to be different. And if we collect this data over 500, 1,000, 1,500 rounds, I don't know that we'd call it accurate, but it's something that we can provide to council that at the very least is going to show for the folks that participated, this is what folks are saying they'd like to see more of, right?
Well, and with that, you just said that there was a play again feature, but earlier you said that we were going to make sure we didn't have the same IP addresses going back. So when there's a play again feature, is it going to erase the previous result? So I'm just trying to figure out how that works, because if you're playing again, but we're tracking IP addresses, and then we're excluding entire IP addresses out of it, looks like they're trying to essentially
it's the difference
game the
between
system.
Someone going in and playing again 10 times and someone creating a bot that plays it 7,000 times, right? We are not going to eliminate duplicative IP addresses, with the exception of if we have some internet dominators out there who go in and manipulate them.
And I think part of it is that I would really love to see valuable, great, excellent feedback from our citizens, and I don't want it to be washed out by the result of something like this.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, well, apologies for our technical difficulties, but I think you get a good sense of what the budget engagement is going to look like and how the activity is going to work. Again, we'll let you know when that is live and ready for our residents to participate in.
So this is since you're talking about March Madness, I mean, one thing you do, I guess, in any level of March Madness, there's what's called seeding, and you just kind of randomize, put things in here. Typically March Madness or any NCAA sporting championship has seeding. Here's the number 1 seed, and we'd probably all turn and say, well, that number 1 seed would probably be public safety. Number 1 seed would be police, number 2 seed would be fire. Okay, you have those seedings that happen. So anyway, it does, I'd rather us focus on things that are meaningful, so.
Thank you very much. Is that all you have for us for now?
That is all we have.
Okay, wonderful. We appreciate it. I think we have lunch now. Is that the
That's
plan?
hour for lunch, Mayor.
Okay, so we will come back at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming back from our lunch break. We will now turn things over to City Manager Benda.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. We are on the second half of our retreat today. Here after lunch, we're going to have Greg and Donna help kind of participate through and give you kind of an update on our capital improvement plan, looking ahead. And then also, you'll remember or recall that conversations of the last couple weeks together about the amphitheater and the opportunity to take a bit of the city's $15 million surplus and use that to help fully fund that project. There was questions by council about other ways in which to maybe expend those monies, so staff will walk you through about other opportunities that we may have, other projects that might fit within that surplus. We're going to use the easels that are around and show you kind of those projects. Behind you, we have some city staff. Greg will walk you through those projects, and if there are subject matter expert kind of questions as it relates to parks or a library or other things, they will be positioned near the easels for that opportunity. And then at the outset, I talked to you a little bit about our brand or city branding, and that one of the things coming in to the city 2.5 years ago, 2+ years ago, one of the things I wanted to work through was the way we look. And part of that is now with the confluence of certain investments we're making into city council chambers and also our city website, which just works out by way of synergy, I thought it was time for us to kind of look at the way that we look. And Anna and Kyle are here, and we're going to engage on that. And then also just talk to you about your brand. Your brand each week, you sit up on the dais, you have a seal that sits above you, and in working with the city clerk and with communications, we think we got a pretty cool opportunity for you guys. So, Madam Mayor, that's the second half of this afternoon. And one point of order, I know that we've extended to you and your peers a potential tour if you'd like to attend our police headquarters. I'm hearing from Clay, who's almost like the weather report, not to take away from the media that's here, that while it is raining and muddy, we think that we can get you pretty close to the site so that you don't have to necessarily tromp through too much of it. Considering you'll be wearing hard hats, there are areas in the building, because it's raining, there's water that trickles in, but we'll have nice hard hats that keep us dry. So just a little bit of an update. So with that, Madam Mayor, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to Budget and Opportunity Investment. Greg Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, I'll turn it over to our CFO, Donna Witt, to walk you through the first section of this presentation.
All right.
Okay, once again, we are very early in our process. Capital is a challenge. And so we have gotten our submissions. If you ever want to know what keeps me up at night, this is it. This is it. So our outstanding debt, we've got $106 million in city capital and $76 million in schools. So our total outstanding debt is about $183 million. Debt service on that debt is about $10 million for cities cap and $8 million for schools. So we're right at about $18.5 million. So that's important because this is all paid out of the general fund operating budget. So based on estimates that we worked with our financial advisors, Davenport and Company, very closely, and we did some estimates on our current CIP, which is 24 through 28, and what we figured is to stay within that about $18 million worth of debt service, we can borrow approximately $77 million over the next 10 years. Now, most of you have heard me give my spiel about the pig and the snake. And once we did Heritage High School and that large project, around 21 through 23, we were going to have a little bit of capacity in our debt service as other debt fell off. Well, before the pig got through the snake, we put in a guinea pig, and we did a police department building. So there's really no way to do further projects without increasing debt service because we got to pay for them. So my next challenge is going to be figuring that out. based on submissions, now this is submissions as we got them. There's been no analysis, been no trimming, this is just as I received it. So when you look at this, city funding between pay-as-you-go, what we would normally put in pay-as-you-go, those requests, and then the other projects, we're at about $421 million for the next 5 years. Obviously, that can't happen. So we're going to be doing a whole lot of work with this, but really just want to give you a first blush that the projects have been submitted, and you see school renovations there, $60 million, and then their maintenance projects at $46 million. So that's $100 million that's really new to the CIP based on school board's conversations and their early decisions and whatnot. This is what they've submitted. So just know I'm up, I'm working, and this will look completely different before it is proposed to you. I've already given a lot of project managers heads up that we're going to have lots of conversations. There'll be a lot of work that's done on this before you really see anything proposed. And that's what I know. Any questions?
Vice Mayor Feraldi?
In a previous document, it said something to the effect of that we're going to maintain debt servicing, I'll use my terms, at current obligations. Is that accurate and in line with what you're saying here?
No.
Even though there are needs down the line in the CIP for the upcoming budget, we're not adjusting that yet.
That previous slide in our operating budget priorities was to make sure that we do cover our debt service. We are legally obligated, and just like your mortgage, you're going to make sure you pay your mortgage. So we're making sure that we are budgeting for and taking care of all of our current debt obligations through debt service.
So I think we're saying the same thing?
But
and we have
going
expectations
forward,
of changes down the line.
yeah, council has made it pretty clear there's not a lot of interest in increasing debt service. So we got some work to do.
I'm sorry for being dense. So are we saying the same thing as far as fiscal 25?
Well, no. For 25, we'll make sure we budget what we currently owe, plus estimate what will be put on the line of credit for current projects. But we're going to have to figure out, as we add important projects, how we fund those. We're going to have some hard conversations about which projects really move forward and how we want to fund those.
So help me understand, quote, fund scheduled debt service on current debt.
Yeah, we're going to pay for what we owe. We're going to make our mortgage payments.
I understand that. How is what I'm saying different to what you're saying?
I thought you were saying that I'm saying that we're not going to increase debt service in future years.
No, just for the out years, we're going to need growth. For this upcoming initial, we're maintaining.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I was trying my best to articulate that. And certainly I appreciate the dialogue there. First thought for me would be to do a bit of back and forth of prioritizing and trimming. What are the things we need to do, we've got to do over the next foreseeable future years, out years as we would call it, and then putting it back into the hopper and breaking down what the cost would be, and then adjusting and amending to these are the things we've got to do over the next few years to make that space available for the debt servicing. So that's how I would do it. First, prioritize, trim, and just keep on going down. And that would be certainly where I would start. And I commend you guys for
I don't make a lot of friends when I do that.
Thank you, Ms. Witt.
All right, Mr. Patrick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This next section, as the city manager mentioned at the top of the retreat, Finance Committee a couple weeks ago, Donna went through the projected year-end results for fiscal year 2023, and while those aren't completely signed, sealed, delivered, we're really close. And after taking a look at where we're going to land, what you find is there is about $15 million in excess fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2023. And let me explain what I mean by excess fund balance so we're all on the same page. So what that means is in our existing fund balance, we have enough cash to fund all of the cash contributions that were made into the fiscal year 2024 budget, both in the operating and the capital budget. There is enough cash to maintain City Council's rainy day fund, for lack of a better word, at 11.8% of the general fund budget. So we have that cash set aside. Over and above that, there's about $15 million in what would be excess fund balance. So this is money in addition to what Council's financial policies require you to have on hand. As we started talking with council members about the Riverfront project, we got a number of requests about, there's 15 million, you're recommending using 3 million here. Are there other opportunities that we might have for investing that excess fund balance? So what we're going to go through is a look at some of those options. Now, there is, of course, no obligation to fund any of these items, but we wanted to present council. We wanted to answer the question and put it in council's hands. If there were some opportunity investments out there, what would they be? What would they look like? What would staff recommend? So we'll go through, we'll review some of those options. We'd also like to, after we go through the options, go through an activity with council, an exercise with council to see if we can't identify any of the items, if any, that council would like to pursue with the excess fund balance. If there are any, we would then amend the budget on December 12th again. And of course, if we don't spend any of those funds, what we would recommend is that they be included to fund pay-as-you-go projects in the fiscal year 2025 budget, or remain in fund balance for a future use. The question on the table is, the obvious question is, well, why would you do anything other than fund pay-as-you-go projects with these funds? And I'll tell you, that's it's the right question. As we went through the COVID period and all the revenue uncertainty that we had a lot larger revenue variances than we had typically had in prior years. And what that meant is council's investment in pay-as-you-go capital projects through the last 2-3 years was substantially larger than it had been in prior years. And we are still working through carrying out all of those projects that we have planned to do, right? So we have capacity within the organization to complete projects at the rate in which we've invested in PAYGO over the last 2 or 3 years. We haven't been able to keep up with completing those projects. So we have the ability this year to probably pull back on the amount of PAYGO projects that we fund, with the understanding being that we will spend the next year catching up on the projects that council's already invested in, to where we'd be ready at the end of the fiscal year and into fiscal year 2026 to probably start funding PAYGO at as high a level as we can at that point. So that's the presentation we'll review today and the overall plan. Next, we're going to go through some of the community investment opportunities. Anna, can you or one of your staff pass out we have a handout to accompany the presentation that's going to provide you a little bit more information here. But again, these are projects that staff has identified and spoken with many of you about. as opportunities in which to invest the excess fund balance. So the first project, converting the White Rock Elementary School into a neighborhood center. So many of you are aware, LNCAG occupied this building for a number of years, operated it as the Head Start building. They have recently vacated the building. As a result, there's no tenant in here. City owns the building. It's in pretty darn good shape. LNCAG got a grant a couple years ago to completely replace all the windows. It's a great facility. It's 4 large classrooms on the first floor, 4 on the second floor, and then some office space, administrative space in the basement, and then there's a whole community room with a full commercial kitchen attached there. And it's a real opportunity in a neighborhood that we haven't invested in recently to really make a meaningful, impactful investment in potentially a neighborhood center. What this building really needs to be fully functional is an elevator. Right now, there's no way to access that second floor. The elevator itself, we've estimated the cost to be about $1.5 million. This $3.5 million is enough to kind of start the transition and build out part of the building to the extent that we could operate it as a neighborhood center. It would take probably more investment to finish the entire building, but there are tons of opportunities in that building. It's a really big space, and there's a lot of potential uses, whether it would be housing nonprofits that provide service out in the area, potentially maybe even adding some police presence in the facility. So we still have to work through all of that. But bottom line, we've got a building that's coming offline, and what we know is that if we do nothing, bad things are going to happen, right? So you lock a building up like this, inevitably we don't keep up with the maintenance. People will break in, they will steal the copper, and they will go scrap it and earn a lot of money. And before you know it, you've got water, you've got no copper, and it becomes a real issue. So if we don't do something with the building, we're going to have to really look at how do we get it off the city's books. So how do we put an RFP out there to see if there's anyone else that would be interested in using it. Next, renovating the main library. As most of you know, there is a project planned in fiscal year 2025 to renovate the main library. That project is going to cost more than what is planned in the budget for fiscal year 2025 to the tune of about $3 million. We could certainly, we have one main library in the city. It is, interestingly enough, that is in the mid-'80s. We occupied what used to be the Sears and Roebuck building. We put the library in there, have done basically no renovations since then. Interestingly enough, the Sears Distribution Center is where our Public Works site is as well. So we have made good use of former Sears Roebuck's facilities. But again, construction inflation has resulted in higher than expected cost, and if we want to do the right project out there at the library, it's going to take more funding than what we have planned. Next, continue the waiver of the $10 a month refuse collection fee in 2025. This is an item that council implemented in this year's fiscal year 2024's budget. Results in $120 in annual savings for residential customers. Will cost about $2.7 million to continue that program. Next, purchase a ladder truck for the fire department. I think we began conversations around this purchase at the meeting on Tuesday when Chief Wormser presented. There was some conversation around the purchase of this ladder truck. It's going to take 36 to 48 months to get it delivered. We have making good progress with Liberty on all the agreements required for the new fire station. We are going to need to fund this ladder truck at some point in the near future for that to be a successful endeavor. Next, the property toolkit. A lot of the items in the property toolkit were included in the proposed budget last year, and there has been a lot of requests from council to revisit some of these items. This goes back to the conversation you had around the comprehensive plan this morning and some of our housing issues, our affordable housing issues, and blight and neighborhood improvement. This would fund, increase funding for demolition and stabilization of blighted properties, potentially seed funding for a housing trust fund, and then, of course, set aside funding for strategic property acquisition as opportunities arose. We have $1.5 million here. Next, waive the vehicle license fee in fiscal year 25. Again, this is similar to the refuse collection fee. This would continue a council initiative. As you can see there, each vehicle, depending on the type of vehicle and the weight, has a different annual fee. A typical passenger vehicle is $29.50 a year. So, a typical family of four is going to have 2 or 3 of those vehicles. You're looking at, probably somewhere between $30 and $120 for an average Lynchburg family in savings there. And of course, everyone, almost everyone, whether they rent or they buy, owns a vehicle. So this is going to provide a savings to more folks than your refuse collection fee waiver would. Next item, design Bass Elementary. This would align with the current plan as we understand it from the school board for the facilities master plan. Schools has estimated the cost of the Bass renovation at $15 million. If we just take 10% of that, we would see that a design typically we would estimate design would cost 10%, would be about $1.5 million. This would get that process started and give us a good sense sooner rather than later what that renovation would actually cost. Next, replace the City Stadium artificial turf. This is actually a timely item in that we have a contractor in the area replacing the artificial turf for one of our local colleges. This turf is approaching the end of its useful life, and it is showing signs of that wear and tear. This is where both high schools play football, soccer. The stadium gets a ton of use. It is time to replace this field. We're thinking it might cost a little bit less than the $1 million that's on the sheet, but we'd want to be safe here. If we move forward with this quickly, it's likely that we could get this field replaced before soccer season in the spring, and Wyatt Woody's here to provide some additional context when we get through the presentation here. Next, implement a public safety recruiting and retention strategy. We're sort of putting the money ahead of the presentation at this point, but on the 12th, we are going to come back to council with a very comprehensive strategic plan to help fix some of the recruiting and retention issues that we have had in the police department and across our public safety services. This funding, while the effort is going to be comprehensive, strategic, it's going to look at a number of different ways that we would go about improving our recruiting and retention. This money would pay for recruiting and retention bonuses, both for new and existing employees of the public safety services based on the number of vacancies that exist. It's going to align, you'll see, with what we are hearing from the police department in particular about items that would really help morale and help boost retention efforts. And again, much more to follow on December 12th here. Design and construct the MLK Bridge improvements. The MLK Bridge was built back in 1982. It's named after Dr. King in 2005. There's significant maintenance necessary right now, about $500,000 that if we touch the bridge in any way, we're going to have to complete from a VDOT standard. We would also use the remaining funds for sort of bridge amenities, beautification. Public outreach is underway, but that's a project that is necessary but unfunded at this point. Next, we have 3 parks. Again, Wyatt is here to explain some of the details around these parks. I won't pretend to know this as nearly as well as he does, but all of this investment would leverage existing funding to expand our park improvements in Perrymount, College Park, and Heritage Park. Next, we have $500,000 for the Randolph College Business Corridor. We looked at how we could invest in business corridor funding. This is beautification, pedestrian wayfinding improvements, and we looked across the city at where we might find business districts that are sort of ready for this type of investment. And quite frankly, in the range of funding that we're talking about, if we had $6, $7, $8 million, that would open up a range of possibilities. But at around $500,000, it's really this Randolph College Business Corridor, which is Bedford up through Rivermont Avenue, that is really ready for funding like this, and it would allow us to leverage what is already going on there in the private sector, by the private sector. And we talked about Heritage Park. Wyatt will provide you more information here. And then improve the parking at the Awareness Garden, $250,000. This is a project I think most of you have spoken with the board of the Awareness Garden. This project, the Awareness Garden, it provides a place for folks who've been impacted by cancer to go and reflect. It is a beautiful amenity in the city. It's at the Ed Page entrance of the Blackwater Creek Trail complex. What the Awareness Garden organization is proposing is new parking that the city would participate in. We've got a rough design. That new parking would cost about $375,000. The Awareness Garden would contribute about $125,000 to that effort. City would contribute $250,000. And then the Awareness Garden would also expand the garden by spending an additional $200,000 to actually $250,000+ on the expansion of the garden. So you're looking at total investment of close to $600,000 in the project, $250,000 of which would come from the city. And again, these are the strategic investment opportunities. Again, the plan would be to, we'll talk about what we're doing next, but if council has any interest in these items, we would, of course, be able to amend the budget and get moving right away. There are a number of items here that are extremely timely. You've got the field replacement. Because we've got an organization that is mobilized, if we want to move forward with that project, we really need to make a decision as to whether or not we want to invest now. The recruiting and retention effort and the ladder truck for public safety, those are initiatives that we are, with the recruiting and retention effort, we want to get moving on that quickly. Ladder truck, we're going to get a need to invest in sooner rather than later. But there are a number of opportunities here to invest across our city. Of course, anything that council chooses any of this money that council chooses not to spend would go towards PAYGO or stay in fund balance. But those are the opportunities. I'd stop here and ask if anyone has any questions before we move on to the next phase.
Vice Mayor
The only comments I would have is thank you for giving us options. Of course, can't do all of them, but thank you for giving us a number of items to consider, ranging from relief to strategic investment to creative new ideas. So I do thank you for thinking outside the box to that end. And the only comments I would have would relate to the next phase of what do we do. So
excellent. So we have, and Anna and her team will set them up, but we have boards.
Oh, okay, go ahead, sorry.
We have boards that will set up. We're going to have our subject matter experts around the boards. They're going to be based on city council priorities, things quality of life, public safety, lifelong learning, infrastructure, and I'm forgetting one. Economic development. And as I said, we'll have our subject matter experts around the boards that are related to those projects. We're going to hand out to you guys stickers, and quite frankly, all the stickers the same color. If you're interested in investing in the project, just put a sticker near the project that you'd be interested in investing in, and we'll allow you to work with staff over the next 10, 15 minutes, however long it takes, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about where we are from there.
Okay, council missions?
One thing, thanks for putting this together and kind of giving us a nice overview of it. Something that I hear about a lot, because I live in one of these areas, is the promises that the city made when it annexed in 1976 to the people that used to live in Campbell County and now live in the city. I would be curious to see what we could do, and I know one of the things that we're moving forward on is the Richland Hills project. That's a big step forward. But some of these neighborhoods where there's no street lighting, because that's a public safety issue, is there an option that even with, I know that other localities have done solar and things like that, what would that look like, right? As one of the options that might be something to put into this. There's, like I said, there's a lot of things, like I've said previously, there's a lot of things that are nice we can spend our money on. There's things that are necessary. Public safety is definitely a necessary thing. And I also think keeping our promises to our citizens, especially since they've been going on since 1976, is something we really need to look at.
Gainell and Clay here, so if, as you go up to these easels, certainly ask those questions as well, and we can kind of talk about it with them there as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The reality is there's still another $4.5 million from the ARPA money. So that ARPA money, was $4.5 million that was originally planned on funding fully the amphitheater. So that $4.5 million, the ARPA money, I believe can go about anywhere, can it, Donna? I mean, I know there's some time limits. The easiest thing would be to go to pay down the debt of the police headquarters. But that ARPA money could do just like the ARPA money used for Richland Hills. The ARPA money could go to Windsor Hills and Vista Acres and other places to do those streetlights. So the $15 million is the excess over and above the fund balance, the over and above the pay-go. So this $15 million and is really an additional $4.5 million if we look at the fact that that amphitheater is now going to cost $8 million because that $4.5 million has not been allocated. And I believe it still could be changed, couldn't it, Donna?
Well, it's been appropriated.
Been appropriated, but it could.
To the project. We have done the RFP and have actually, we haven't signed a contract with the winning bid.
Right.
But that's kind of where we are.
So I think
Because
the
that
plan
winning
is to-
bid came in at almost double what, yeah.
The plan at this point is it's appropriated for the project. We're coming back on the 12th with a budget amendment to add an additional $3 million from this.
Is what the
pot.
request
So
is, but the reality of it is, as you said earlier, that council decides.
Oh,
And so that $4.5 million that has not been spent, I know it's been appropriated for something that we thought was going to cost $4.5 million, that's now almost double. So with that being the case, that $4.5 million can be used for other items such as here. The other thing is, just as a curiosity question, last year, when we saw this excess fund balance, several of us said, hey, let's do something about it. And I think a majority said, oh, no, you can't do it mid-budget year. This has to be waited until next budget, which the budget's coming up. But now we're seeing lots of different projects mid-budget year that's saying, hey, let's spend this money. Help me understand that. The difference between last year and this year.
The major difference between last year and this year is the conversation was around ongoing savings, ongoing uses of the funds last year, primarily for tax relief, if I remember correctly. These are all one-time items. So if we use the money on one-time items, it's a completely different calculus from a budgetary standpoint because we're not committing the next budget to an item we don't have an answer to. And I'd also like to add on the Riverfront project, if when the budget amendment comes back on Tuesday, there's not a majority on council to appropriate the additional funding, then what I'd say at that point is we don't have a project, right? And that's the time we start to have the conversation around reallocating potentially the remaining money in that project. But until we get through that, I think we set that aside, we make that a separate issue that'll resolve itself at the next meeting. And if there's not support to move forward with the additional funding, then again, we don't have a project and we can certainly reallocate at that point if that makes sense.
Vice Mayor Feraldi?
I do know we have a bit of an exercise. I do think it is worth getting up on our feet and seeing how that plays out, but I do have a couple considerations to offer in contemplating the riverfront property. It's my understanding, generally speaking, $1 million gets you how much on on debt servicing? Theoretically, normally, it gets how much?
Rule of thumb, $1 million gets you $10 million in debt. $1 million in debt service gets you $10 million in debt.
So with that line of thinking, if we were to take $4.5 million of ARPA money, as Councilman Helgelson is proposing, from the riverfront and apply it to the police station, the police headquarters, what is the debt service gain on a per year basis?
450.
So
In
400
practice, it's probably closer to 380 or 4, but using that rule, call it 4.
To use the manager's term, I'll call it meatball math. I'll put it at 500,000.
Okay.
Just to play along. If $500,000 is the general, what we're assuming is going to be the savings on a year-over-year basis, and it costs us $3 million up front right now with Lynchburg dollars to get that project, which will generate economic activity. Do we have, it's a simple mathematical equation where we can take how long it would take to pay ourselves back that $3 million based off of scenarios about what metrics about what we need to make from the riverfront investment. In other words, we can go to the operator of the amphitheater and say, we need you to meet these metrics. We need you to meet these qualifiers on a quarterly basis and report back to us that you're generating this much. Otherwise, we're going to find someone else, because otherwise our investment is not producing the desired result as the board presumes. And so that's the logic I'm trying to look on this. Do we get more bang for our buck reducing the debt servicing on a building, or do we get more bang for our buck in the long run, assuming, yes, it's $3 million of one-time dollars right now, and as the council member has rightly pointed out, the upkeep costs, the maintenance, so to speak. I think that's the most logical, nonpartisan, not bipartisan, nonpartisan way to look at it from a financial place. What's the year-over-year cash flow savings? What's better from an economical sense? I think for the riverfront, that has to be the thinking point. And I'm sorry for speaking so, macro economically. I'm not sure what it is, but that's my logic. Does that make sense, at least to you both?
Sure. And here's what I would tell you. We are not going to generate enough direct tax revenue to the city in the first year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to cover the annual debt service costs. We're just not, right? We're a little different than Charlottesville. Charlottesville doesn't have admissions tax. We have admissions tax. That makes the calculus a little bit more favorable to us. That being said, there's a couple things to consider around the riverfront project. Number one, in the long run, does it pay off? I think I can't point to anything. I think there's a pretty good chance that it absolutely does. It's a game changer.
May I interrupt if you don't mind?
Sure.
Forgive me, and I know I am. Does a police headquarters, specifically, directly, indirectly it may, does a brick and mortar building such as an IT building, a police headquarters, directly bring in tax revenue?
No.
That we know for a fact. And so let's balance this out. It's just that simple. From a cash flow perspective, even if it's
we're way better off doing the
$150,000,
amphitheater.
we're already in net gain with the $3 million investment. I would ask council to think through that. If you still want to oppose it, by all means, make your decisions. But I think, especially for this project, we need to look at it as an opportunity. It's not a roundabout. It's not even street beautification. It's not another, simply another building to put offices in. I mean, this is something different. We don't get opportunities to have this type of thing that often. So I'd ask you to consider that. If others want to comment to what I brought up, feel free to, but I do think there is merit to doing what the staff has presented. The final thing I'll say, and then feel free to respond. Top to bottom, here's where I land, so there's no questions about it. There's about $4.2 million of tax relief, broadly speaking, whether that's the car registration piece or the trash, what have you. It's about $4.2 million. The riverfront is about 3, ladder truck 2.4. All the parks components are about 1.8 million. Property toolkit with a slight reduction to 1.25 million. City staff, stadium turf project 1 million. Public safety retention 1 million. Awareness garden 250,000. That in total is 14.9 million by my guess. If we were to do all of that, that's the cost. I'm not saying we do all that, but if we were to, that's what it looks like. I'd also like to point out, this is my final piece. In Finance Committee about a month or so ago, I put forward a policy that said, at minimum, if we are ever in this situation again where we have additional taxes coming to the city that were not projected, at least 30% should be set aside automatically off the top to go back to the taxpayer. And unfortunately, the Finance Committee shot it down. It just so happens that this math works out exactly to 30%, give or take a little bit. I think this is a blueprint of both what the state is doing, it aligns with what the governor's doing on a broad basis, and it could align exactly what we're going to hear from the comprehensive plan requests from the city about what they want. For me, I think it's a robust package, and if we were to be debating budget amendments at a fully fledged council meeting, those are the items I would want to see.
Thank you.
I do have a question about White Rock Elementary School. I'd be interested to hear from Dr. Wilder and from Councilman Taylor about this, if we can just have y'all comment on it. I know that in the coalition that I'm working in, we're talking about the need for the community centers in all of the areas of the city, specifically this part, and that's one of the hills that does not have one, that is really desired by that community, by that neighborhood, for many reasons, for the youth, but also for our older population. So that's something that definitely piqued my interest. I mean, it is expensive, but I know it's a need, and so I'm very curious to hear maybe what Dr. Wilder and Councilman Taylor have to say about that one, if y'all don't mind sharing your thoughts.
Well, I'm always believing in investing in the community. There's not a lot of resources in the White Rock area, so it's always important to invest. And if you, as I think it's someone just mentioned, if you don't do something with it, it's going to be it's abandoned, it's going to be destroyed. So I'm definitely always in favor, if you have the resources, to work with Parks and Rec, I guess, and do something to bring some resources there, because it still has some challenges in the area. So we could partner with several partners to bring in maybe some job services and other services for persons to help bring them out of some poverty issues. I think it's always an opportunity to support that community.
I agree. We, from an educational standpoint, we need after-school programs for the children. Workforce development, it would be a good location for them in that area. Police precinct, if we can get all this incorporated in there, we'll do good. So it would be a blessing to the neighborhood and an asset for the community. If you already have I have to dismount on my playground, I guess, but we got a playground already there for the children. So it's a win-win for White Rock neighborhood.
So the primary expense there, from what I understand, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Was the elevator cost?
Yeah, the elevator is a big expense.
Yeah.
It is a big facility. If you've not ever been out there, my takeaway from walking in and touring it a couple weeks ago with Clay and Gaynell was it's a lot bigger inside than it looks from the outside, right? The $3.5 million is not going to touch getting the entire facility up to say a Miller Center level refinish, or renovation. But what it will do is provide funding to transform enough of the facility that we can start using it as a neighborhood center. Would require probably 1.5 FTEs in the probably 26 budget in order to make that happen. And then from there, it's a facility that's eligible for CDBG funding. It's a facility that when we had other potential times where we have opportunity investment opportunities like this, we can invest additional funds over time to get it up to a Miller Center level. But it is an opportunity right away to put a real neighborhood asset in an area that just doesn't have it. And I'll tell you, if you haven't been up there, I'd really recommend you go and you check it out. That neighborhood where that building is, it is built like neighborhoods were built in the 1950s, right? It is in the middle of the neighborhood. It is the green space between 3 streets. It is just an ideal place for a facility that's serving the neighborhood, serving the youth, serving the community as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. And just, since Councilman Taylor's from White Rock and with Dr. Wilder being our Ward 2 rep, I just wanted to make sure we got their input. Councilwoman Dolan, did you have a comment?
I do, yeah. So it's a great building. I've been there, and the reason Lynchburg vacated was because they didn't have access. And you could probably, if you fix this building up, use it for multi-purposes, and maybe even Lynchburg could go back in there with their Head Start program, but they had to leave because of that. So I think you could do a lot with this building for future use. Absolutely.
Councilman Missions? I'm sorry, Councilman Taylor.
If it would help the city, we could solicit private donors for the elevator.
I was thinking that too. Curious.
I just want to
Councilman Missions?
point something out real quick. $3.5 million, and you're saying the cost of the elevator is the majority of it. But I'm looking right here, I just pulled it up. The cost, and this is insurance company standard estimating software, to replace a commercial premium grade 4-stop elevator, the most expensive you can get, is $184,000. It's nowhere near $3.5 million.
Well, this is installing one, correct?
This is replacing it, so that's installing it.
No, this is not a replacement.
No, when I say replacement, that's the verbiage used for actually putting in the entire elevator, a brand new elevator. A shaft is not going to cost you another millions of dollars. It's just, I would just think that those numbers need to be tightened up and revisited. And I think that there is some merit in doing some improvements in that building, because I think it would be important for workforce development. But I think that it would be good to see kind of a menu of where are those $3.5 million going, and giving us options in there. Because I think that it's very important for us to create workforce development opportunities in areas in our city where we don't have as much employment or labor participation. So that I could see, but I just wanted to point that out.
Clay, would you mind coming over and maybe answering that question real quick? I'm sorry, Mr. Councilman Huggins.
Come to the
Yes. Just maybe to speak to maybe the cost, if you have any of that information available.
Hey, good afternoon. So we had vetted the cost originally through a local engineering consulting firm, and they had quoted us a budget number of about $1.5 million just for the elevator. You're looking at having to add the structure entirely to do it, we think, and that was based on other bids that they had done and been involved with locally recently.
Mr. Brenda?
And Clay, just so that we're not engineers, when you say, because the building itself, and if we could, can you get back to the building, show the building? So having toured this myself, and one of the things LNCAG butted up against in not having that ADA compliance or accessibility, they couldn't access grants to help kind of put that money, and that's why they moved. And so I think what you're saying with this is there's no physical way, and sometimes this happens in older homes when you put HVAC in, you can't necessarily go through the middle of the building. You're going to have to go on the outside of the structure. Is that what you're?
That was what we had planned, yes, sir. Yeah, you would have to find a place to do an entire separate elevator shaft, foundation through roof, similar to what they did over at the Miller Center.
In the firm that you used in Market, who was that?
It was Virginia A&E.
Okay.
Councilman Helgeson?
Some of this that we're looking at, we just heard, said that 3.5 million won't even touch what needs to be done. Plus, once we do this, that requires then operating funds, another 1.5 FTEs just as a minimum to operate it and to open it. So typically when we look at finance and we follow the wisdom, it usually tells us to count the cost, which means counting all the costs. So you spend $3.5 million, you kind of fix it up, but not really. Then you got to pay more money in operating. So before we just start loosely spending more of this excess, let's really think about what is most prudent. If there's problems in this building, and if there's, we already talked briefly this morning about possible private solutions, great bones, great structure, sell the building before it gets all the copper taken out. Utilize the fact that somebody else could invest in there. Then they can bring their own private funds to put in their elevator if they can get it for $180,000 versus $1.5 million, versus if they need to access other grants, if they can do other things. So when something isn't utilized, rather than we need to count the costs, which means counting all the costs, which means what we just heard, that $3.5 million ain't even going to touch it. It's not going to make anything be okay, but then it's still going to be operating funds. So obviously, each of these projects would be easy for us to just say, oh man, this is great. Let's get this one, and this one. As Chris just said a minute ago, it's spending the 15 million or 14.9. Back to the amphitheater downtown, the 4.5 million, just the debt service was the 4 or 500,000. The extra 3 million or 3.5 million getting to the 8, you're looking at 800,000 in debt service, 800,000 a year, because the total cost of that amphitheater is 800,000. We had just heard that it will have no way that it'll meet that debt service, let alone all the other operating expenses that are going to be with that amphitheater. We then take an amphitheater that was sold as, here's why we do it, because I think your term just the other day, Greg, the slide said it's an economic engine. I don't think we've ever said, hey, let's fund a bridge or let's fund a police headquarters because it's an economic engine. That's a total use for the entire community. An economic engine means you're investing money in something in order to get the return. 800,000 a year in debt service is over 1 cent on the tax rate. $8 million could be utilized for other things that are critical. I don't think before we should just, casually throw out numbers and say, hey, let's spend here and spend here and spend here. Let's really recognize that next year, this budget coming up, our revenues are tightening. Let's not make it more difficult to continue to operate. Let's not give more reasons for people to come and protest and say, oh, you spent all the money, but yet you still want to lower the taxes. Let's actually be very prudent and very thoughtful. There's some projects on here that I think are very good and very worthwhile. Some of the rebates back to our citizens are fantastic. Some of the possibilities. I was here years ago when we first did the grass, the artificial turf, and now it's used that useful life. That sounds like something that is reasonable to replace as opposed to building something new. It doesn't sound good, We don't get pats on the back or accolades to say, oh, look at this brand-new thing I did, because it's replacing old city turf. But it's helpful, and especially now, if the old one is worn out, the intent when this was originally done 20 years ago was eventually it's going to have to be replaced. It serves its useful life, you replace it. Some of these things sound pretty good. Some of these things are easy to be done, one-time things that are relief back to our taxpayers. Some of the refuse collection, the waivers, some of those things are good. The fire truck, we can look at to see when that is going to be needed. It sounds like we have to order that a lot sooner. But so many things, we gotta, when we're talking about something that's supposed to be an economic engine, economic engines require a little more sophistication when you're looking at the net present value of this economic engine. Does it actually create wealth? Is it going to be beneficial, or are there lots of other expenses that we haven't seen? And I think any of these, we got to count the cost before we just say, wow, that would be a neat thing to spend $8 million on an amphitheater downtown. You look at some of the other expenses. You know, we got the report, or I got the report from Chimera with regarding Charlottesville, shows about $370,000 of actual tax revenue. Long way from the 8 million or 800,000 from the debt service. That doesn't, that's the revenue. Doesn't include anybody cleaning it up. Doesn't include the flushing the toilets and the water and the trash and all the different associated items by maintaining. So hopefully we'll think this through very diligently, not just as a child writing their Christmas list, wish list of all the different things, because this is real stuff. Lots of us that campaigned on the fact that our taxes are too high. Majority has. Majority was elected on that fact. That means we need to actually look at spending priorities, not just what sounds good, not what just may feel good or something, but really, is this going to be beneficial? Lots of these projects are pretty neat. They're really exciting, but I think we can do better. And hopefully we can look as we proceed with our putting up stickers and whatnot that will really recognize that this is serious business. I mean, this is serious money. We have to look out for next budget year, what is going to be happening. Some of this money we could easily just defer. We don't have to do it instantly. We don't have to spend it, because all the money that we keep in our coffers, we're getting some pretty good interest on it right now. Every report that we got last Tuesday with Finance Committee, people had budgeted this amount of interest. It was up 1,500% because we're getting paid to have cash, because interest rates have risen so much. Deferring some projects, it's not going to hurt. I think it's going to be helpful because of the fact that you have very expensive inflation costs right now. Maybe once you're in a recession, things are going to come down, or we're going to say, well, maybe this isn't as much need. Years ago, our previous city manager, Kim Payne, was confronted with the Civic Center. And he said, absolutely not. Those things do nothing but drain city resources. They're a neat concept. This amphitheater is a very neat concept, but the draining of resources, I think we need to look at that very prudently and look at the actual expenses that are going to be associated with maintaining. What is it going to generate in revenue? What do we already know that we're going to have, even just the simple debt service? We're going to have $800,000 a year in debt service versus $300,000 in revenue. Having some expenses off the revenue, we're not getting there. So hopefully we'll look at it prudently as opposed to just rose-colored glasses and hopeful.
Councilor Feraldi.
Thank you for reducing my logical, well-thought-out, economically driven numbers filled thought process to a child's Christmas list. I would ask you, Ms. Witt, are we financing $8 million, or are we contemplating using $3 million of one-time money to pay for it, and one-time money of $4.5 million to pay for it. So we're not,
It's all cash.
so
It's
there's
not
no
finance.
debt financing on this. So it is a logical fallacy to say we're going to be doing debt financing on this project downtown.
That's correct.
Thank you. I appreciate you articulating that. I would also like to point out, if you don't mind, because I'm gonna take this on a little bit. You can't say you're for reducing taxpayers. You can't say you're for reducing the tax burden. You can't say you're a conservative. You can't say you're for limited government. And all the things that we both campaigned on. And you're just going to say we shouldn't reduce the meals tax, we shouldn't reduce the personal property tax, and amongst other things, Jeff. Respectfully, I am struggling to understand the logic. If you oppose the project, tell me you oppose the project.
Which one, this one?
If you oppose the project, tell me you oppose the project and move on. If you have a logical use for the other funds, share them. I'm humbly submitting that I don't understand the logic that we're just going to dispute an economically driven argument. If it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. But respectfully, I take it as an affront, honestly, that we're gonna say we did all this great work on fiscal conservatism in the budget when we're also not trying to find out ways to increase the tax base. You keep trying to cut me off, and feel free to, but ultimately, Jeff, I don't understand where you're coming from on this. And, I would ask you to consider that what you just articulated isn't factual. There's no debt financing on this whatsoever. It's a cash deal. And so at the end of the day, the ultimate cost, yes, is $3 million on this project. Is that worth bringing economic activity to downtown? Is it? You mentioned the civic center or civic centers were a bad idea, according to a previous city manager. How many major headliners are coming to Lynchburg outside of the academy? And if I was to Google it right now, I'd go list by list of who's come. I mean, some worldwide headliners, comedic acts, go to Roanoke. Some major artists go through Charlottesville, Richmond, Roanoke. They hop right on 29 and drive right through Lynchburg, Virginia. Listen, I humbly submit that this is a project worth considering from a factual, logical place. And to insinuate that we're going to fight for the taxpayers when we're not even going to consider a policy that says off the top, 30% of any surplus that comes in immediately goes back to them. And on top of that, we're going to say if it comes from meals tax and it comes from personal property, we're not going to touch that for 5 years. I don't understand where you're coming from. So, if we want to do this exercise, let's do it. And I appreciate you might want to respond and feel free to, but I don't understand the logic.
For the
I don't want to cut
He
you off.
should
I don't want to
respond.
cut you off, so let me know when you're, now? To respond? Okay, so with that, I greatly can appreciate those concerns and thoughts and whatnot. But just a minute ago, or 5 minutes ago, you asked specific question. 4.5 million, what would the debt service be on the 4.5 million? And they responded, 450,000. You said, okay, we'll say 500,000. Granted, because we're not financing this with debt, that would be the same thing if we lowered the debt. So the opportunity cost is what somebody would call that, is that lost opportunity of spending $8 million on an amphitheater means we had lost the opportunity of $800,000 a year in debt service. Maybe a little bit less, depending upon the interest rates. With that, I've looked at the numbers in Charlottesville for their amphitheater, the Ting Amphitheater specifically. They crunched some numbers and they said, ooh, that's not going to meet that. That's not going to meet that debt service, 800,000. You would also do an actual, what's called a net present value analysis, which we can easily do on my calculator. We can show that $8 million invested today versus the revenue that is generated. So I'm assuming that we're going to invest this, if the money goes out to build this amphitheater at $8 million today, the cash inflow, assuming we do just as good as Charlottesville, which has been in existence for quite some time, they've got a fairly good track record. We're going to assume what they did. Their revenue was $372,000 according to that Chimera report. That was the revenue. Let's just take out a few expenses, like flushing the toilets and picking up some trash. So let's say the whole revenue is $300,000. Let's now look at what our interest is. And our interest, our cost of capital when we borrow money is somewhere around 5% now, maybe a little bit less, somewhere around 5%. You do a net present value analysis, and it says that this project, from an economic engine perspective, is a negative $4.886 million. The technical way that you would assess a project in the business world would be, what does it generate? It has to be positive in order to say, hey, that's a good project. Then you would say it's a project that you can do or can't do. Then you assess it with all the other uses. We got an infinite number of uses. Right here, they had several uses that could say, hey, we can spend all of these different projects. The capital improvement plan, all the plans associated. They're probably $500 million as far as things that we could spend money on. And with that, it's not just a list of what's given to us today, it's all of these items. Now, back to your question with regarding the tax relief. I would love to see all taxes lowered. Absolutely. I'd love to see the meals tax lowered. I'd love to see the car tax lowered. I'd love to see our trash tax lowered. How do we do that? We don't do it by spending money. We do it by actually very judiciously allocating the taxpayer resources to make sure that we're not spending on something that's not helpful. So with regarding the priorities, I just think the first priority, if we're going to have any taxes lowered, we probably should have it on long-term capital assets that are helpful to help appreciating property or help get businesses here. Lowering the car tax would be fantastic. Lowering the meals tax would be great. With that, though, we have to have priorities. Priorities means if we don't spend all of this, if we don't spend this $15 million, I'll gladly support and absolutely second lowering the car tax, unequivocally. I think that would be great. But if we spend this money, guess what? We're not going to have it to be able to lower the car taxes, and we're going to have to prioritize. So I think all of these things is a matter of having a little bit of fiscal discipline that says these are neat ideas, but maybe we ought to punt on some of those. Maybe we could sell some things to the private sector. Maybe there are some things that we can defer and delay as far as doing the amphitheater. Maybe there's some things that we can do to help incentivize our taxpayers. Fantastic, I'm all for it. If we spend all the money, guess what's going to happen in 3 months from now? We're going to have a budget that their staff is going to come up with, and they're going to say, uh-oh, one of these items that Donna presented in the last one said, what's happens? Well, if you don't do this, what are one of the consequences? Well, you got to raise revenue. That was one of the items if we don't take care of all the items. So I think we can do it. It's not an affront to you or your economic savvy or putting it out there. I just think that, and if you wanted a question for sure about that amphitheater, absolutely not. I don't think now is a good time for it. Absolutely not. That $8 million can easily, that is $800,000 a year in debt service that is foregone. Whether we pay down the police headquarters, whether we take that $8 million and do some of these other projects that are needed, whether it be street lights, lots of things that could be done with that, or whether we give it back to our taxpayers, and whether we say we're going to lower one time for the car tax. This is one-time money. We could one-time lower the car tax. Hallelujah. Do it.
If I may briefly, and thank you for explaining your position a little bit more in-depthly. That was helpful, and I do follow the logic now, and I certainly do appreciate your explaining.
Okay, well, I know we need to move on for a second, but I would like to say a couple things. One of the things that we're not discussing here about the amphitheater, and I mean, I know we're going to have a chance to talk about it on the 12th fully in a full discussion. I'll get to council missions. But, so I would like to get to the project that or the, what is it called? The activity we're doing. Thank you. But I do want to say something that we need to consider is when we're looking at the revenue generated off of the amphitheater and similar things like amphitheaters, you know, the moneymakers aren't the ticket sales. The moneymaker that Lynchburg looks to make, the revenue generator, are the people coming in to our hotels, the people that are buying our meals. I would love to see the data, maybe when you come back on the 12th, of go back to Charlottesville and show us all the money that's generated over a weekend when artists come to town, and show us the number of increase in sales in the lodging and meals, and local businesses that benefit over every time they have a headliner come in, because that is the money that we're giving away by not investing in our city. We are giving away money. We're talking about losing money. You have to, the primary rule of thumb for business owners is you have to spend money to make money. So while we can honor campaign promises or commitments to lowering taxes, which we did this past year significantly, we can also invest in our city to create revenue opportunities, which also helps us to be able to lower taxes. So you can't get caught up in ticket sales being your moneymaker, because that's really typically, I don't think, where you see your big money come in. It's what comes in with it. It's all the people that come in from the region or around the state that would come into Lynchburg now and spend their money here on opportunities like this, and that's what we have to focus on. So that's the data, Winter, I would like to see maybe on the 12th to show us those numbers, because I think that would probably be very helpful. And in Roanoke or whoever else that has something similar, would you agree that that's probably a fair thing to look at?
I do. I think what's in the study is taking a lot of that into consideration already. It's the revenue that the city would receive through all those tax streams. So your consumption tax, so your sales, meals, hotel. Charlottesville doesn't have amusement, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there, and you're not going to, that revenue that we generate directly in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 isn't going to cover the counterfactual debt service, right? That being said, the way these things tend to work is if we don't spend this $8 million on the amphitheater, a couple things you can do with it, right? You can say you use it to pay down debt on the police headquarters, right? So now you have $8 million more in capacity to spend on other projects, right? Because you've taken debt that you had on the police precinct, you've freed it up, now you can spend it on other projects. None of those other projects are going to generate revenue. That's the reality. So what you're really choosing between is, do you want to spend $8 million on a project that is going to generate, wide range, $250,000 to $500,000 of direct revenue a year, or do you want to spend that money on capital investments across the city that are necessary, but aren't going to generate any revenue and aren't going to have probably the intrinsic benefit that comes from having a real amenity, right? I think those are the questions that the council's got to answer. And for us as staff, what we would tell you more than anything else is do the project right or don't do the project, right? It's don't value engineer it, right? If council decides that this is an investment worth making, let's do it right. If it's not, then we don't do the project and we reallocate the funds. But there is an intrinsic benefit in having an amenity like this the money, if we don't spend it on this, we are going to spend it on other capital investments that are necessary that will not generate any revenue, direct revenue. So that's the real question you guys, I think, have to answer.
Council missions?
Things on this. A lot of good information. Thanks, Jeff, for breaking that down. I don't think everybody understands always the net present value and opportunity investment. So what you just explained, essentially, it's going to be when you include all of the citizens' money being spent, it's a net loss with the operating costs and the revenue coming in. And when you include that counterfactual debt service, including all that, because we lose that opportunity to spend that money elsewhere, right?
So we will have more money and not less debt service if you play it all out, if you invest in the amphitheater. You just won't have some other capital investment.
The question that I have, I know I've seen it, and we talked about it last year during the process. I know that previously there was discussions about pad-ready sites. I know that Megan Lucas has mentioned that as something that was necessary. And to me, that's a better example of investing our citizens' tax dollars into something that would actually generate a significant amount of revenue and jobs for our citizens. So if we want to look at a way to spend our citizens' money, which I want to do that as little as possible, we need to look at projects that are actually going to have a real economic impact. New business, new industry. Apparently that's one of the places where we're behind other localities, from what I've been told in the last year on those pad-ready sites. Is that correct?
They're in the CIP.
They're in the CIP?
To be done in the next couple of years.
And
CIP.
and price point, do you remember where we are on those, what they were?
I do not, off the top of my head.
About $1 million?
It's about $1.7 million, I think, if I remember from my.
So if we really want to invest our citizens' dollars in a way that returns some sort of economic impact to the city, increases the city's revenue, increases the ability for our citizens to generate wealth with jobs, good jobs, right? That would be, in my mind, something that could be argued for, right?
And I'm playing fast and loose here. The 1.7, I think, goes for site preparation.
Yeah, it
Doesn't
does
build
not
you the
get you a
spec.
pad-ready site.
Doesn't build you the spec.
Significantly more.
Yeah.
But we said pad ready, not the building. The pad, that's what I just mentioned, was pad ready, not the building.
I don't think.
Two different things as far as, sorry.
So
It's 11 total, right? Just, okay.
So with all that, and then also there's the public safety aspect too, which should always be the priority. And I'm looking at the current budget that we're in, and we've got $423,000 of revenue replacement from ARPA in the CAD system replacement that's coming up, and then we have $4.5 million that's going to a line of credit, right? So another reasonable place that we could put that money is into that CAD replacement. And we could actually do that faster because that infrastructure is very old and falling apart. But going back to what I said previously, I think we really need to kind of draw back on the spending, take a look at the promises that we have made to the citizens since 1976, and look at some of these items that we might be able to do and actually follow through on what we said we would do as a city for decades. And that's where I'm at.
I know you said that it would free up the $8 million if we didn't spend it there and we covered the debt service. And some new project may not have revenue, but let's think about what Senator Newman just told us a week and a half ago about smart scale, about where we probably won't be getting smart scale anymore. The smart scale is where we're getting state money to fund some of these desperately needed road projects where all citizens drive, not just a select group that go to certain neighborhoods, but all citizens that drive. And once that smart scale money is dried up, what are we going to have to do for the roads? We're going to have to do those fixes ourselves if we're not getting the smart scale money. Or we'll just say, we won't do them. And what happens when we don't do them? Then we have traffic jams, and we're going to have to finance those and debt service finance those roads and those road improvements. So freeing up the debt service is a very wonderful thing because that's less of a, so just saying one is going to generate revenue and even a paltry amount of revenue versus one not generating any revenue is better, we would still have the $8 million. And we wouldn't have the fact of what those actual expenses are. So hopefully before you come December 12th, it sounds like you're still moving forward with December 12th to say, do you want to do this amphitheater or not? With that, all the items need to be on the table, not just the incremental amount of saying, hey, we got $3 million more because we already accounted an extra $500,000 that came from somewhere else. So the total project is $8 million. Being factual, it's 7.9991, whatever. Okay.
$2 short of it.
Yeah. So now we're looking at what the revenue is, and that's where the Chimera report shows that that revenue is coming from meals tax, lodging tax, those kind of things. Amusement tax, I guess they don't have. But it also is, it doesn't have anything in there with regarding expenses. So that is something we would want to say, what are the real expenses? Obviously, if we have a brand-new facility down there, there's going to be expenses. There's going to be water and sewer. The grass mowing, we probably got to mow the grass already, so that may not be an incremental difference, but taking care of those beautiful trees in the pictures certainly are. What's it going to be like after an event? What kind of cleanup is required? What kind of fix-up or maintenance that would be? I know Donna had talked about a long time ago, figuring out how we could fund depreciation. And it's a project that's going to depreciate after every time it's used, which was going to require some maintenance. So what those expenses are out of the fact of what it actually would possibly generate from the economic benefit, just like that Chimera report.
Excellent. Madam Mayor, if we can transition to the
Yes, let's go ahead,
activity. All right,
please.
Anna is going to hand out to everyone some blue stickers. And for the activity, it's very simple. We're going to have some subject matter experts around the boards. Those subject matter experts can have some information about the projects that are on the boards. They're separated by city council priorities. If you are interested in supporting those projects, put one of your blue stickers next to it. If you're not, you don't have to do anything.
Oh, you got
but everyone's going to
twice as
have
much as
enough
me.
blue stickers to hopefully signify which projects that you support. We'll revisit this after we're done, after 10 or 15 minutes, and bottom line, what we're looking for, are there any projects with 4 blue stickers? And if they are, we'll discuss them. Sound good?
Sound great.
All right, let's get going. All right, so thank you for your participation in that and the conversation. I think it's been a really good, thoughtful conversation. So for the sake of argument, we're going to set the amphitheater aside, right? We're going to not make this part of this. And we're going to set the money for it aside, not included as part of this process. So what that leaves us with is $12 million related to all the projects that are up here. 8 of the projects on the boards have 4 or more green stickers. Now that we've figured out the not to vote in volume and to vote one time per project, 8 of these projects have 4 or more stickers. They are the White Rock Elementary School, Heritage Park, the Awareness Garden, the Ladder Truck, Public Safety, the Public Safety Strategic Recruiting and Retention Plan, Refuse Collection Waiver, License Fee Waiver, and the turf. That totals $12.8 million. That is about $800,000 more than what we have available. So if it is okay with council, what we would like to do is take this back, check our numbers, make sure we're as tight as we can be on these items, and then on the 12th, we would bring back 2 budget amendments and some conversation at the work session as well. That would be 1 budget amendment for $3 million for the amphitheater, have that stand alone, right? That stands alone. Based on the results then, from there, we will sharpen our pencils, and we will have these other 8 items included in a budget amendment for consideration by council as well. Does that work for everyone? Can you repeat those again? The items are White Rock Elementary, Heritage Park, Awareness Garden, Ladder Truck, Public Safety Recruiting and Retention, Refuse Collection, Vehicle License Fee Waiver, that's Refuse Collection Waiver, Vehicle License Fee Waiver, and the City Stadium turf. Awareness Garden is in, yes. So those are the items with 4 or more votes, and we'll bring that back to council for consideration on the 12th. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. We will now, are we going to take a break or do we want to keep going? Let's just keep going. Okay, Anna Benson, Director of Communications and Public Engagement. We will now talk about branding.
So while Anna's going to give the presentation, I'll take this time ahead of the presentation to say thank you to council. I know that taking a day out of your busy lives and committing to the city, I really appreciate that. Thank you for each of the staff and the participation that was had here. Hard work went into today, and I hope that it's borne out. I will offer that after this, we're going to try to do this promptly at 3 o'clock. There is an opportunity to tour the police headquarters at 3 o'clock. Any of those interested, we'll make sure that we have hard hats, glasses, and what have you. And so with that, we'll turn into the branding presentation. Okay, so when I arrived here about 2.5 years ago, I was interested in kind of all the ways in which that we reflect or project who we are. And above me are different iterations of the seal, and Jeff and I were having a conversation. In his 18-plus years, he's seen different iterations and or maybe investments in city council chambers. One thing I wanted to do as a municipal corporation is to ensure that we're all on message, or all on brand. And what I found, if you take, next slide, here are all the ways in which that we exhibit ourselves. And you can see, I understand paramilitary is different in how that they show themselves and different than the city per se. And as well, if you're selling a ticket, if you're selling, you know, kind of an experience, that's why we have economic development. But then as you start to get into some of the other areas that are, like you can see our Rex Parks has our library and water resources, and all that's good and healthy. But again, what I find sometimes in a cacophony of noises, you have different business cards, you have different letterhead, you have different things. And I think if anything, it's borne out that corporations that do well are on message, on brand, and there's one unifying way in which that we articulate that. Here are other ways in which through programs and others that we've used ways to which to communicate with our city. And so it was with that in mind. And remember, transitioning Joanne Martin, fabulous employee, I said fabulous employee when I arrived. She had 40-plus years. And then so since then, you know, had some working in and out with communications directors, but I'm super happy to have Anna Benson here. And then Kyle, where's Kyle? Kyle in the back, young man, has done great work. Don't tell him this, he won't hear it, but for what we pay him, I'm so glad he's here, because we don't have a big super, you know, firm that helps kind of do all this. But the product I hope that you like, and at your tables, if you haven't seen, remember there's different brands. There's the brand that you have, which is the corporate seal that sits above you on Tuesdays. You should have at your desk there 2 pins that reflect that, and we hope that you would want to wear that on your lapel. And then we're working together to get name tags as we go to events so that we know who each other are. With that, turn it over to Anna Benson.
Okay, thank you, Winter. Before I begin, I just wanted to take a quick point of privilege to recognize a couple members of my team. Big hand for our broadcast team, Phil Spinner and Shaquille Cook. They really work tirelessly on-site and off-site, and actually Josh Quintero was back in the control room at City Hall making sure that Channel 15 is broadcasting right now as well, so it really does take a village. They're also responsible for that smooth jazz that you hear before every meeting. That's all Phil. But I also wanted to recognize our intern right now, Aisha Iqbal. She is a graduate of Heritage High School, associate's degree from CVCC, and a graphic design and digital media BA from the University of Lynchburg. She's currently completing her master's degree in user experience design at the Maryland Institute College of Art. So thank you, Aisha, for being with us. So Winter really took you through the why we're doing this, to create cohesion, a cohesive brand and message that resonates, you know, across city departments, that represents the city's work. And you've seen this throughout the day, but I have the great pleasure of formally sharing the city's new logo and telling you a little bit more about the process and our next steps. I wanted to also recognize Kyle Hegner. Kyle's been the driving force behind this, putting his pretty brilliant design mind to work. We have done all of this in-house, conceptualizing all the logos that we've tested that you'll see, and then the implementation of that as we move forward. So in considering a logo update, we wanted to ensure that we captured the equity that exists in the city's logo, the skyline, the river, those unique Lynchburg assets, as well as the engagement process and equity that exists externally in our LYH Loves You branding. So we tested these logos. We developed a series of 3 logos that we tested with the entire city workforce in a group of external stakeholders. These 3 logo designs, we tested against some positive messaging about the city as a vibrant, positive, appealing place to live, work, and play, and invest. We had more than 450 respondents to this survey, which is a great response rate from the city's workforce. So you see respondents are more likely to say, so we tested them against one another and against these messages, and a positive overall impression of the city. And these are just a few of the questions, just to give you an idea of what the process that we went through reflects a community that is appealing to young professionals and young families. And our new logo, which you've seen all day. So this might be the most anticlimactic moment of the day, but we wanted to incorporate this into your whole presentation today. And also just a couple other ways that we can use the logo with or without a circle around it with the LYH. So you'll see these in various ways as we begin to deploy this. The biggest opportunity really with our new logo is our new city website. Our go live date for this project is January 3rd, 2024. We contracted with a firm called Civic Plus, who's really a leading provider of municipal websites across the country. Our current website is 15 years old, which is a very old website, and it was built and is hosted by IT. So many, many thanks to the IT department for that 15 years of work, and it's an amazing site, but it's not a best practice for security and for new features and mobility and all of the ways that we can be transparent and accessible to the public. So our new site is going to feature, has new web-based editing platforms, features. We trained our page masters across the organization in November, and again, we'll go live with that in January. Some other things that we will switch over quickly early in January as we implement this, things like standardizing our signature lines across the city, standardizing our business cards. There's a table on the second floor of City Hall that has every iteration of every logo and every business card for years, so we'll be working to update all of that pretty quickly. And here's a quick timeline. We really started this project with the research that was presented at a council retreat, I believe, in 2021, around messaging and who the city is and demographics. We've been working to develop the graphic representation of that since then. We did our survey in July, and then since then we've really been planning implementation and working to launch that website. All our digital assets will switch over in January with the website, and then we'll be working really through 2024. It's going to take some time to get this done. We're not deploying additional resources. This will be existing resources that we use. Obviously, digital switches are all things that we can do in-house, and print and other branding implementation we'll be doing as we can over the next year. As Winter mentioned, your brand is the city seal. Fun fact, this is the first time we've really digitized the seal that hangs above your head in city council chambers. And you have at your table 2 pens that I hope that you will wear, which are the first sort of representation of this seal. And we're pretty excited about that. But we'll also be providing you all some additional digital assets that you can use in your communication. Email signatures, business cards, letterhead. We'll be providing that to you in January as well so that you can begin using the city seal in your formal communication as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor Fraldi?
The inner marketing person that has been developed over the last few years is all over it. So I do commend you guys. I think it's a good progression forward, and I hope no one has terribly hard feelings about their department logo per se, but I do think it's a good path forward, I think, for the city, and thank you for the work that's gone into it, especially doing the bulk of the work seemingly internally.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Submissions?
I think that what you guys are doing with the website is critical
Yes, sir.
right now with the threats that are out there for cybersecurity and stuff, and it's really important, and I applaud the change. The city website is pretty archaic, and there's so much stuff on there.
That's right.
And you can dig and find, and I don't even want to.
It's worked really hard for a long time. It's
Yeah,
time for it
but it's
to
you
go.
know, this is going to be, I think, very good for our citizens to be able to access information. I know, and Mr. Friedman might be able to speak to this. I think that there's some changes coming up with FOIA as well from the state law, as far as records go, where stuff's going to have to be digitized, right? Isn't that coming? Yeah, I feel like I remember something about that, and so if there's, I guess, opportunity to make those records just automatically available, that would be even better.
Anyone else?
Yes, did that cost me an elevator?
No, sir.
Well, I commend you all on your hard work. It looks great, and I think, refreshing things is important, and it looks very streamlined, so, and marketing is obviously important, so good job, and obviously updating the website also super important, so thank you all for your hard work, and it looks really great, so appreciate it. Anything else? No? Okay, well, if there's nothing else to add, this meeting is now adjourned, and our next regularly scheduled meeting will be held on December 12th, 2023 at 4 p.m. in Council Chamber. Have a great weekend.